Introduction. During the summer of 1877, a railroad appeared at the doorsteps of Tryon, North Carolina, and a business decision was made to extend the tracks up the mountains, which was referred to at the time as Melrose Mountain. Times were different back then, when decisions could be made in short order, and work would begin in earnest. Within 6 months, railroad men cut a 21-mile steep trench up the mountain and through the wilderness to Hendersonville. When the grade was completed, a rail system was used to bring coal down from Andover, Virginia, through Saluda, North Carolina, to Spartanburg, and then finally on to Belmont, North Carolina, where a Duke power plant was waiting. Most of the 620-mile round trip was considered routine, but the Saluda grade was far from it. Under safe and controllable speeds, the 14-mile stretch from Saluda down to Tryon could be done in around 20 minutes. But the ghosts of lost men that accommodated the now infamous points along the track might attest that their trip was much faster. The stretch of rail strengthened the definition of the word steep. In fact, the grade, which today is known as the Saluda grade, set a record for being the steepest standard gauge railroad track in the entire United States. It was so steep that several horrendous train wrecks described both human beings and livestock being driven into the earth with such force that it took days and even weeks to exhume their burnt and demolished remains. The trains which traveled the track were dreadfully long, with some measuring more than a mile, pulling more than 13,000 tons of coal. The massive trains, armed with 3 lead engines, would crawl into Saluda Station, where they set their dynamic brake systems, checked the safety mechanisms, and said their prayers. A road foreman of engines from Hendersonville, dedicated to piloting the massive amount of machinery down the grade, would take over the controls and do whatever he could do to prevent a freewheeling ride into eternity. According to officials of the Southern Railway, Saluda was considered a train engineer's nightmare, where each train would struggle over a 1.4% upgrade and then contort each car one by one over an apex, destined to a maximum 4.9% downgrade plunge. According to Norfolk Southern track officials, rail cars were known to snap apart at the couplings as the men in the caboose watched in horror and radioed the road foreman a mile ahead with the bad news. Mother Nature created another railman's dare when torrential rains washed out an area of the track at the climax of an 11-degree curve, earning the danger name Sand Cut. It was not until enough lives were lost through this crude trial and error that Norfolk Southern finally installed expensive safety features. At first, the railroad employed full-time switchmen who were posted at runoff points to listen for blaring train horns, screaming for help as they charged out of control and down the grade. Signalmen manning the spurs would pull a switch just in time to keep the train from tumbling into doom. Later, high-tech CTC signaling systems were installed, armed with automated timers and switching circuits. But even with advanced rail technology, train wrecks continued to occur until the mid-70s. Slaughter Pen Cut became a household name after a crash took the lives of more than 35 cattle and several men. The notorious location made railroad history when, in 1903, at least 2 out-of-control trains entered the same curve at speeds between 60 and 100 miles an hour. Everyone from engineers, firemen, cattle, and hobos were demolished in the mangled wreckage. Today the tracks sit dormant, with most of the railroad equipment covered in fabric, smashed, and weathered out of commission. The railroad was the lifeblood of Saluda, because without it, there probably wouldn't even be a town. The railroad was also the primary transportation route for the summer population who ventured in from hot climates elsewhere. For many years, a thriving pediatric hospital operated within the town of Saluda. The ozone-rich air was proven to have a medicinal effect on children who suffered from chronic lung problems. During the summer, there was also an onslaught of physicians who ventured in for educational conferences, relaxation, and, of course, square dancing. Between the summer vacationers, who were primarily female, and visiting physicians, the town's population tripled in size as the town locals became passive observers. This story was inspired by a film I made called Going Home, Saluta's Music Traditions. I, along with the Saluda Historic Committee, produced this full-length documentary on this wonderful town of Saluda, North Carolina. I learned a lot about this fine town. A few years after we finished this film, I began piecing together a fictional story under an alias name of Melrose, North Carolina. Please note, this novel is a work of fiction. No reference to any real person, country, organization is intended or should be inferred. This is what I like about writing fiction. You can make things up. To square dancing. It was just good, honest fun. The Summer Girls by Kirk Gollwitzer. Mother, Father, Me, and Him. Prologue. I'm not quite sure how to start. It was just so bizarre. But, well, here goes. I woke up to the sound of a car door closing. It was barely light, and I thought it was much too early for my father to be leaving for work. I lowered my feet to the floor, edged over to the window, and gazed down on the driveway below. A county police car was facing our house, with only its parking lights on. I spotted my father speaking with two police officers, one in uniform and the other in a suit. I'm wondering if a neighbor had called in about an intruder, a thief or something. They finished their conversation and returned to their patrol car. Slowly, the automobile backed out of the driveway and drove away. My father re-entered the house and all was quiet. I considered going back to bed, but something just was not right. Why would the county sheriff be here rather than Gudger Knowles, our local sheriff? If it were just a bunch of kids causing a disturbance, the county wouldn't be here. Gudger would. I left my room and quietly walked down the hallway to the top of the stairs. My father was standing by the window in the foyer, staring out. "Is everything okay?" I asked, breathing through the silence. He was in deep thought and said nothing. I paused for a moment in respect. "What's going on? Is everything okay, Dad? Why were the police here?" "Come down here, son. We need to talk." He slowly sat down on the chair by the window and looked down at his hands. He appeared troubled, but strangely calm. Did something happen to one of the neighbors? He adjusted his robe, crossed his leg, and allowed a slipper on his right foot to dangle, just as he was allowing me to dangle as well. "Well, that all depends on what neighbor you're referring to." He seemed clued into something, but taking his time and letting me know. "Rainy Ray," he said, speaking through the darkness, "your mother's in a bit of trouble." "Mom? What do you mean, trouble? Is she okay? Is she here?" "No, son, she's not." "Well, where is she? What's going on?" "Rainy Ray, your mother's been arrested." "What? For what? Are you kidding me?" "No, son, I'm afraid I'm not joking." Well, what for then? What was she arrested for? Your mother was just arrested for the murder of Victor Rathers. That son of a bitch, I thought, reeling with frustration. They found his body down by the tracks at the bottom of the grade. It's a pretty gruesome sight. He must have really done something really wrong. Well, why do they think Mom did it? That sounds crazy. What was he doing at the bottom of the grade? Mom couldn't even get down there. That's what they're trying to figure out. Yep, that's going to be the order of the day, he said, standing up. I'm going to put on some coffee, and then we're going to go meet Uncle Bud at the police station up in Hendersonville. They want you to come up there with me too, Rainy Ray. Well, I expected that, I answered, louder than I should have. My Uncle Bud was a criminal defense attorney who practiced in Asheville. Thinking about some of the cases he's handled told me that we were in for a big one. Go wash your face, son, and put on a nice shirt and a clean pair of pants, because it's going to be rough around here for a while. Chapter 1. My name is Ray Holford, and I was one of those Melrose boys. I was 9 years old when I caught my first glimpse of the summer girl population invading our town of Melrose, North Carolina. It was as if they were falling out of the sky from some other planet, invading our quiet community with a vengeance. The old folks used to say, there's plenty to go around there, boys, so play nice. Most came by train from Greenville, Spartanburg, and Columbia, but it seemed the majority came from Charleston and along the coast. I'm told it was dreadfully hot in the low country, so they came up here to cool off. But the temperature here went way up because those summer girls weren't just pretty, they were gorgeous. They came from wealthy families and were usually accompanied by their mother and grandmothers. I don't remember ever seeing any summer boys, and for that matter, I didn't care. All I wanted to see were those pretty girls. Their fathers came up here for a night or two, but soon left after they arrived. They had to tend to their big businesses on the coast. They were from another class of society, wearing their wealth proudly on their forehead as they strode through the town with their noses held high and their defending eye on their offspring. Most had large seasonal homes that were closed during the winter and reopened in the summer. As a rule, the summer girls were not allowed to date the Melrose boys, and we were restricted from going over to their homes. I guess they thought we might spoil their seeds. They were wise. Oh, we might be able to go over there and sit on the swing and have a glass of lemonade with them, but soon their grandmother or mothers would appear on the doorway and say, "Come along in, darling, it's getting pretty late." Well, it might be only 9 or 10 o'clock at night. The only time the community ever saw the summer girls was at the square dances, and that's when both classes came together. During the winter months, Melrose withered down to a boring shell of a town with nothing to do but dream about the summer months when those pretty girls returned. The town folks kept to themselves and pretended to pay little attention to anybody else's business. Fact was, everybody was so tuned into everybody else's business, it was ridiculous. I remember the older kids breaking up with their high school sweethearts in order to be free and clear when them summer girls came back. It was also no surprise to the local girls either. They knew what was in store for them. And for that reason, the Melrose girls resented the summer girls. As I think back on those past summers, I'm convinced that our entire town's population went completely crazy. Everyone was so excited upon their arrival, but so resentful when they departed. On this summer, the excitement level turned explosive, and the resentment became sinful. This was the summer I came of age and discovered manhood. It was also the summer that I learned more about myself than I ever wanted to know. We were mountain people with limited education and very little communication with the outside world. My father's name was Wilford Holford, and he was the proud owner of Holford's Grocer, which is right next to the Western Union office in the center of town. And I can't remember not working there. While the summer girls bragged about their worldly vacations, we Melrose boys couldn't relate. If we were not in school, we were working. For as long as I can remember, I worked in my father's store. My father was an average-sized man with a large personality. He was also very kind and even-tempered. He was not a demonstrative person like so many others in town were. He didn't hug everybody that walked through the door and get into their business. He'd leave people to their own, and I believed that people appreciated that about him. The rest of the retailers in town made it a point to be excessively caring about everybody, every single time they passed through those doors. Most especially Victor Rathers, the king of caring. How's that beautiful mother of yours? Oh, Lord, your daddy's one lucky man to have a woman like that. You know, you're looking pretty good, Rainy Ray. You got a girlfriend yet, Rainy Ray? You know, every time I look at you, you remind me of myself when I was a kid. I love you, Rainy Ray. What the hell did he mean by that comment? Yuck. Every time I saw that man, he told me how much he loved me. My father, on the other hand, was a soft-spoken man with a large face and a wonderful smile. Rarely did I ever see my dad wear anything other than a blue dress shirt under a red vest with a full pocket full of pencils and a large ring of keys hanging on his belt. He always wore tan pants and black shoes with thick rubber soles. He was usually running the store from his elevated office, which was built high above the registers. He could watch the entire store from his tower, from the meat department to produce to the cashiers and even out into the parking lot. My mother's name was Elaine, and quite honestly, the most beautiful woman in town. Side by side, my parents looked like the odd couple. She had long blonde hair which was usually fixed in a ponytail. Everybody said she had a gorgeous figure and a fresh smile. She was taller than my father, and was often confused as my older sister. It was weird growing up with a mother like that, because she was a true looker. Men used to flirt with her often, and it pissed me off. Often I wanted to jump over the counter and smack the shit out of them. I think constantly guarding my mother from the men caused me to become more of a defensive person at a very young age. Well, I guess now is a good time as any to confess to you that my mother was a summer girl, and I'm a direct descendant of the summer girl invasion. Yep, she was a summer girl from an island south of Charleston called Wadmalaw. Her father owned and operated a tea plantation down there. And of course, during the hot summers, her mother would bring her up here to Melrose. She met my father at a square dance and fell for him. Somehow, he talked her into moving to Melrose, claiming that she would absolutely love it here. Well, that didn't quite happen, though he figured. When she came here, she hated it. I'm told it took her a very long time to adjust. For about a year before she married my father, she lived in her parents' summer home and dated my father during the cold months. After her father passed away, they sold the house, and it later became the Melrose Inn. I would have been born in that house if my father hadn't rejected the idea so much. He claimed that the summer homes were poorly built and not insulated for winter months. My theory was that my father believed that he would become a laughingstock of Melrose had he married a summer girl and then moved into her parents' home. My parents tried to have more kids, but couldn't because she had some sort of infertility problem. My father confessed to me one day that the reason I was called Rainy was because I was conceived during a rainstorm. For many years to come, every time it thundered outside, they'd look out the window and say, "Well, here comes Rainy." My mother was the voice of the store and the community as well. She helped with the bookkeeping, worked the registers, and kept a protective eye on my father. In many ways, my mom was the face of the store, next to my father's quiet disposition. When I say she kept a protective eye on my father, I meant it. She was usually the one that nabbed the shoplifters and kicked the troublemakers out of the store. I'd like to pause here for just a moment and reflect on an observation I made several years later. I've come to the conclusion that most kids didn't really know their parents as much as I did, and for that matter, they really couldn't appreciate them as much as I was able to. The reason that I knew my parents so well was because we worked together every single day. 6 days a week we worked together in that store. When my school let out at 4 o'clock, I'd be at the store until 8 p.m. My parents were wonderful people, and I can say that I loved them from the bottom of my heart. When I was 13 years old, few of my friends had ever ventured north of Hendersonville or south of Landrum. The only connection we had with the outside world was Victor Victrola and the Melrose Monitor, which was a small, very opinionated newspaper. When my father was a child, the rest of the world had radios. Melrose didn't even know what they were. It wasn't until Lester Thompson, the owner of our filling station, built one out of spare parts and scared the crap out of the old people. My father told me that people were convinced that Satan's voice was talking through a box. Soon everybody gathered at the Thompson station and listened to the news of the day and the game of the week. Our town was finally connected to the outside world. There were 7 different churches in our community, not counting the black church, which no one counted. That church was in Colored Town. Everyone went to church back then, because if you didn't, you were considered a sinner, and a world of bad spirits would hunt you down and ruin you for the rest of your life. The Melrose grade was the steepest standard grade railroad track in the country, with a history of train wrecks on the southbound. It was owned by Norfolk Southern Railway as part of the W line, and most of the townspeople worked for them. Melrose wouldn't even be a town had it not been for the trains, which required a need for manpower to maintain the track systems and help guide the southbound locomotives safely down to Tryon. As kids, we surfed the train cars to the bottom of the grade to the town below us, which was Tryon. We often got a milkshake at a drugstore down there, and sometimes caught a movie. And then we'd catch another train heading back up to our boring little town. Rocking was the community sport for not only the kids, but also the adults, even though they'd never admit it. Everyone threw rocks at black kids back then. Those poor kids were rocked every single day they passed by our school. For the record, I only threw 1 rock at a black person, and I regretted it ever since. I never had an arm for baseball, but on that fateful day my pitch was perfect and a direct hit against the side of Reverend Wainwright's sweet daughter's head. It was one of the saddest days of my entire life when I witnessed that little girl falling backwards on those hard steel rails. I remember her screaming as her blood and tears painted her school clothes and her friends pulled her further down the tracks. None of my peers seemed to care about my dreadful crime on that day. Even the sheriff chuckled under his breath as he drove me over to Reverend's house to deliver my apology. "You got a good arm there, boy. You hit that little nigger girl dead on. You know that? You should try out for our summer league." Tears of sorrow poured from my soul as I gazed at the terrible cut on the left side of that girl's face. But as she stood next to her father, she seemed to be more concerned about my well-being. Ironically, at the complete displeasure of the sheriff, the preacher seemed to pity me. He took my face in his warm and truly caring hands and said, "You're better than that, Rainy Ray. You know that, boy?" I said, "You are much better than that." The preacher killed me with kindness that day as we drove away from Blacktown and back to the normal side of town. Hattie Mae later told me that she and her sisters had planned a counterattack with their own arsenal of stones until her father, in his kind way, convinced them not to. I've never been able to distance myself from that guilt as I walked those lonely tracks down Melrose Grade. The Holford family was one of the few families that were not kin to the 2 other dominant families in Melrose. Until the Summer girls invaded our town, the females in the other 2 families were our only hope of producing any future offspring. Upon taking my first square dance class in the 7th grade, I discovered girls and I was awestruck. But it wasn't until the summer of 1969, following my 9th grade year, that I discovered women. And this is where my story begins.
Our couples move on. Put the birdie in the cage.
Chapter 2.
Keep going left. Let the birdie out. Put the cross.
Jonathan Roy was my best friend back then. His father was a local surgeon, and his grandfather was a Methodist minister. While I was an only child, the rest of the families in Melrose had an average of 7 offspring. John was one of 7 kids, and their household was always alive with excitement. My house always seemed quite boring to me, so I couldn't wait to be over there. John and I spent as much time together as possible because he had such a big house and plenty of things to do with a million brothers and sisters, it seems. He had BB guns, go-karts, tractors, and more food and snacks than anybody could imagine. His parents always seemed to give us full reign of whatever we wanted to do except smoke cigarettes. If John's dad ever caught us smoking, John would catch holy hell. John and I also had a secret world of our own, and that was on the rooftops of downtown. We'd run across the rooftops on the buildings on the main street, snatching Christmas lights and exploding them on the streets below. Most of the buildings were connected in one big line, and few required a running jump to get to it. We knew more about the rooftops downtown than anybody in town. Often we'd enter those buildings through unknown hatches and spy on the shop owners. Once we watched the sheriff drink himself silly on corn liquor. Another time we saw more than we ever bargained for when we peeked through the base of the chandelier at the woman's dress shop. An eye full of a 230-pound Miss Kraft, who was also 78 years old, was quite enough for us. Ironically, we always started at the first building on the south side of town, which was the police station. And there we would easily make our way down to the very last building. At that point, Victor's business, which was called Railhouse Diner, was catty corner and across the street. Once, after we made sure that the sheriff was gone, we pried open a maintenance panel and slid down a water pipe to the floor of the police station. I surveyed the vacant vault while John was bold enough to snatch a pair of handcuffs from the supply cabinet. So about the vault. The police station had once been the Melrose Savings Bank, and the original vault was later turned into a cell. The vault had earned a reputation as being not only the most secure jail in North Carolina, but also the most terrifying. The vault was also quite large and able to accommodate up to 12 inmates at a time. Often federal prisoners traveling by train on their way to St. Louis spent a night in the vault. I'm sure those layover evenings were times those prisoners never forgot. The vault door was heavily fortified with 6-inch holes cut in the center and rectangular slot for food trays. The wall was made of 18-inch concrete panels. When they closed those doors to the vault and locked them, some prisoners were known to scream all night long. The next building over was Western Auto, where they sold everything from bicycles to lawnmowers to train sets to Barbie dolls. John and I found a way in there once, but barely touched the floor when we realized that the owner left his 2 German Shepherd watchdogs there overnight. Johnson's Candy Store was our gold mine. Now, John and I never considered ourselves burglars. We were more like penny candy thieves. I always grabbed a pocket full of malted milk balls and a nice supply of Biddo honey. John went for the beef jerky and bottled cream soda, and then up to the rooftops we went for our banquet. We had our own feast on the top of our town as we watched the town crazies act out on the street below. Usually, we'd watch Gudger bring in drunks from the pool hall, and once saw the minister from Fox Mountain Baptist Church get hauled in with a prostitute. The day school let out, I spent the night at John's house and got ready for the big day at the lake. We woke up to a beautiful summer morning. We grabbed our towels and bathing suits and jumped on my bike, John on the back and me on the handlebars, and pedaled our way to the water. We were on our way to Lake Summit for the first swim of the year and a brand new batch of summer girls. Lake Summit was a beautiful lake where everyone except the black population was welcome. Large summer homes dotted the shoreline, each mostly owned by the wealthy summer families, and only a few belonging to the town folks. A roped-off swimming area with the backdrop of rock mountains painted the beauty of those rich summer memories. Water slides were there for the pleasure of the kids, and diving platforms were there for the more confident swimmers. Our friends and adversaries were already there waiting for the invasion to hit. They were sporting their winter skin and claiming their summer turf. Some kid got his hand caught in an ice cream bar machine and was screaming his ass off, while another kid was being stuffed into the back of a police cruiser for stealing someone's bicycle. The same lifeguards had returned from the year before, and we were excited to see them. Jerry Davis, the lead lifeguard, had a body like Tarzan, and he was the best diver at school. His girlfriend, Emmy, also a lifeguard, had a body like Tarzan's Jane, and everybody dreamed that she would swim out and rescue them. John never had hair back in those days. His daddy always shaved off his head at the beginning of every summer, leaving him with an embarrassing white scalp. It never seemed to bother John either. I would have been mortified to start the summer looking like that. The beach smelled of suntan oil, grilled hot dogs, and baked corn cobs as we sat on our beach towels, surveying the action around the lake. The Melrose girls camped on the other side of the beach, with their eyes glued to us, waiting for their wintertime boyfriends to hook up with the summer girls. One by one, they'd arrive with their mothers in tow. As we sat in our towels with our eyes popping out, it was amazing how beautiful those girls were, while the Melrose girls were so dreary. I explained to John the theory I overheard a man in a store tell another. "You know why them summer girls are so damn pretty?" "No, why?" asked the other man. "It's because they come from money. They're rich." I thought it was a stupid theory when I first heard that, but when I compared my mom to the rest of the women in town, I sort of agreed. The lifeguards were also aware of the invasion as they oiled up their bodies and flexed their muscles. The lifeguards were doing synchronized dives off the diving boards when two beautiful summer girls, along with their mother, settled down right next to us. We had struck gold as the threesomes laid out their blankets, removed their outer clothing, and displayed their fabulous bathing suits and stunning figures. The mother was tall, a beautiful woman with fantastic legs and striking blonde hair. The two girls appeared to be about our age and were probably not sisters. One was a carbon copy of her mother, while the other one had shoulder-length brown hair and a bit of a tomboy look. The daughter was for me, and the tom girl was for John. Done. While I always considered myself to be a bit cooler than my buddy, John was right on his mark and already making eye contact with the tom girl. I instantly joined in introduction, quickly claiming ownership over the daughter as our Melrose boy competition advanced on our private camp. Carol was quickly becoming my friend as Jane seemed very interested in John, bald head and all. On that first day of summer, Lake Summit had become Carol Jane Lake for John and me. We were successful in claiming our summer girls, and even the mother seemed to approve. For the next few days, we met Carol and Jane at the lake, us with our white bathing towels, and the ladies with their fancy blankets and umbrella. They even brought lunch, and we got to know them even more, most especially Jane's mother, who was a fountain of information about her disappointing life in Charleston. She described her existence as if she had both loved it and hated it. The mother's name was Martha Middleton Smith, a self-proclaimed blue blood from Charleston and a direct descendant of Henry Middleton. My mother and Miss Martha were both from the low country of South Carolina, and each had the same history with Henry Middleton. But so did many others I considered. When asked what a blue blood was, she described a haughty group of wealthy families with kept names and outdated traditions. Miss Martha continued, "I was the belle of the ball, a Bishop England debutante. My family ruled the entire swath of real estate south of Broad Street, and my life growing up on the Battery was both wonderful and wearisome." Miss Martha had one other thing to acknowledge as the five of us sat on the shoreline that day, eating fried chicken and watching the activity in the distance. "I'm divorced. I'm no longer married. My marriage has been legally dissolved, and I'm no longer Martha Middleton Smith. I am now Miss Martha to you boys, and it's now my time to live Divorce was unheard of in our Christian community. People stayed together whether they wanted to or not. The only way out of marriage was when either one of them died. I also expect that many couples sat in church on a weekly basis praying that their precious betrothed would soon get their wings. My divorce was a great disappointment to the blue blood families in the large community. Why on earth did Miss Martha leave Hainsworth? What the devil happened to that marriage? Was she having an affair? Did Hainsworth beat her? Martha's such a wild child. Just look at the way she flirts with those men. Would you like to know the truth, boys? Well, I'll tell you the truth. And it's all right, because the girls are very aware of this. He cheated on me. And the sad thing was, I didn't give a damn. We were just married too young. We were stupid. What do kids know when they get married at that age anyway? I was 19 years old when I got married to that man, for God's sake. While it was unheard of for summer boys to spend the night at the homes of the summer girls, Miss Martha welcomed us in with open arms. I think she thought it was safer to invite us in than have us sneak in through the windows. On our first visit, I was horrified to learn that Pearlie Ann Wainwright, the mother of my rocking victim, Hattie Mae, was to be their summer cook and housekeeper. I cringed when I saw Hattie Mae helping her mother in the kitchen, still sporting that noticeable scar on the side of her forehead. I was certain that Pearlie Ann was going to confide in Miss Smith about my horrid criminal behavior, and I'd be out the door like a bag of garbage. But thankfully, she never said a word. For the next several nights, John and I reveled in our conquest with the beautiful girls which we were becoming very familiar with. Carol was a beautiful Catholic girl with golden blonde hair, delightfully plump lips, and a cute pug nose. She and Jane were cheerleaders and had the energy to prove it. They attended the very same private school their parents did, and I'm sure were very popular among the boys. Bishop England was the name of their school, named after Charleston's first bishop, John England. According to Carol, it didn't matter what denomination you were. If you were accepted in, you became a Catholic. While our town seemed to have more churches than stores, we never even met a Catholic. Our Christian community would never stomach the idea of paying too much attention to a blessed virgin woman. We demanded our faith and prayers to be sent to a white male redeemer. And my father always told us a funny joke about Catholics. He'd say, "Do you know the difference between Catholics and Baptists?" The Catholics would say, "They ain't no hell." The Baptists would say, "The hell they ain't." Carol and Jane clearly were more educated than we were and much more cultured. You could tell by the way they described things. The year before, they had spent the summer in France and even learned how to speak the language. John and I had never been to the ocean, and my foreign language skills were limited to a Spanish class, which I failed twice. Why these girls paid any attention to us was beyond me. We enjoyed dinner with the threesome almost every night, never speaking a word of it to our parents or anybody else. Each day, John and I would joyfully pedal the back roads to their majestic lake house, singing out loud with excitement, "We don't care what the neighbors say. We're going to go there anyway."
Swing your left hand, lady, boy. You people on the side, y'all can clap. Come on, man. Swing your partner. Our couples, move on. Put the birdie in the cage. Lift the birdie out and put the crow in. Keep going there. Good. Come on, clap, y'all. Swing your left-hand lady, boys.
Chapter 3. The first square dance of the summer was held on the first Friday of June at the Melrose High School. John and I were to meet the girls at the dance, and we were both excited but highly protected of our prize dates. Melrose was a sea of sharks, and the girls were nothing but live bait. Cars were lined up from the police station, past the school, and beyond to the ball field. The area in front of the gymnasium was packed with people waiting to get in. A poster on the door read, 50 cents for boys, and the girls dance free. When John and I finally made it through the doors of the gym, it was already uncomfortably hot. Anybody who could get on the dance floor were already there, claiming their position in a large circle around the floor. and the room was full of brand new summer girls. Boys and girls alternated one after another. They clung to their partners' hands and danced to the strict orders of Bear Miller, the caller of the dance. Bear was calling the dance, and he was our least favorite. He took his role way too seriously than any other callers. He expected perfection on the dance floor. I personally thought he was a jerk. We learned to dance at the old library when we were just children, so when we approached high school, we'd be ready to come to the big dance. Adults of all ages danced with whomever asked them. It really didn't matter who you were, adult or kid. If you messed up on the dance floor, Bear would call you out on it. He was serious, too. That's why they called him the Bear. Bear had been known to lose his temper and quit mid-dance, walking out and leaving the building altogether. The music would stop and someone would say, "Where's Bear?" Someone would say, "He's done got in his car and left." It really didn't matter anyway because there were so many others in the crowd who could call the dance without losing a step. It was beginning to get hotter by the minute as the dancers twirled to the music of the Green River Boys. Even the girls were sweating as they rushed by us with their perfumed body odor wind. Red River Valley was the one song that had to be played at every single square dance. It was the song that formally kicked the evening into gear. It was the beginning of that very song that John and I realized that we were too late when we spotted the girls already on the dance floor with the sharks. On the other side of the gymnasium, we noticed Miss Martha standing next to the window, looking nothing short of ravishing. She was surrounded by a cadre of male admirers with her long hair up in a French braid. She was wearing a beautiful cotton dress, low-cut silk blouse, and a winning smile. There was our school principal, Doc Jones, desperately trying to engage her in conversation, followed by our banker, Willie Ward. He always wore a three-piece suit, no matter how hot it was. Then, like clockwork, there was Victor Rathers, the proud owner of Railhouse Diner. "Well, there's Rainy Ray. How's your gorgeous mother doing? I just want you to tell her hello from me. You're turning out to be a big man these days. I'm going to have to keep an eye on you before you capture one of them summer girls." "I'm just janking your chain. I love you, Rainy Ray." If Victor was in line for something, Victor usually got it. He'd always act too nice and would never take no for an answer. He always acted as if he was the spokesperson for the church. Whether they gave him that right or not is unknown. His long, narrow face, piercing eyes, and cunning smile sent a different signal to me. The huge ring of couples stretched and strained as the music got louder and Bear's orders grew sterner. This was one of the most challenging times for the couples to hang on to their prized dates. For if the circle broke, you'd be on one side of the gym and your date would be on the other side with the sharks. Bear was hanging on to his last nerve as the line finally broke and the dance fell apart. In the distance, we noticed Victor claiming the hand of Miss Martha, and they were back on the floor for the next dance. Our girls were snatched up by Fletcher White and his stupid big brother. Both brutes frowned at us, daring us just to make a move on our girls. Hopefully, it would just be a matter of time before the girls broke away from them, because those two idiots stunk more than anybody else in the town. They sometimes reeked so bad that their teachers had to leave the classroom to keep from vomiting. Now, outside of the gymnasium and down around the ball field was the only place to get to know the summer girls. And let me tell you, the competition there was fierce. It was also very easy to score beer, some corn liquor, and cigarettes. And it was a great setup for problems later in the summer. On this first night, Gudger had to arrest 2 boys for fighting and take one Melrose woman home to her parents. John and I kicked around there for a while, hoping the girls would come out, but we finally gave up and walked back down the hill towards home. As we reached the train tracks, we heard the girls calling us from the top of the hill, and our hearts raced. We were soon back at Miss Martha's house, relaxing in the dark living room, with Carol and I on the couch, and John and Jane back in the corner on the floor with pillows. We had the entire house to ourselves, each thinking it was time to kiss and make out. Music was softly playing on their expensive radio as we folded into our private romances. At about midnight, we accidentally fell asleep in the arms of our lovers, and found out that Miss Martha wasn't even at home. The four of us were in deep slumber when the voice of a female god came raining down on us from the heavens. "You boys better get your business and get on out of here. Good God, y'all!" It was the housekeeper, Pearlie Ann Wainwright, and was she ever upset with us? She was standing directly over me, poking me in the stomach with a broom handle. Hattie Mae was in the doorway, with her eyes wide open, holding the door open for our immediate ejection. I said, "You get y'all's skinny asses out of here before Miss Martha comes in and sees you. Good night, nurse. You girls ought to be ashamed of yourself. Now get on up to your rooms before I whip you myself. Good God Almighty, Hattie Mae. Help those girls upstairs into their rooms. Oh, my Lord." With only one shoe on and the other tucked under my armpit, we were out the door. A beautiful sunrise was painting the horizon with lavender, pink, and blue watercolor, but John and I found little appreciation in it whatsoever. We were late getting back to John's house, and I had to be at work in about 2 hours. We were sprinting across a neighbor's yard when my foot got caught up in a metal ladder that was laying in the wet grass. Down I went, face first, and instantly I knew I needed stitches. Blood was flowing from my chin as we continued our desperate race home. It was about 6:15 when a car came over the horizon and rolled by us. I was applying pressure to my chin with one of my white socks, praying I could stop the bleeding before I got home, when I caught sight of Victor Rathers at the wheel and Miss Martha in the passenger seat. I'm not sure about John, but I turned my head, praying he wouldn't see us. What was Victor doing with Miss Martha at this time of the morning, and why on earth was she with him? My mind was spinning with thoughts. Victor was a married man and a pillar of our community, even though many in the community crossed the street whenever they caught sight of him. John and I had just caught Victor in a bad spot with Miss Martha, and that was to be John's and my closely guarded secret. Dr. Roy met us at the driveway as we reached their home. He was sporting a dark suit and a bow tie, and he was on his way to the hospital for an early morning surgery when he saw us. It didn't help matters much when a pack of cigarettes fell out of John's shirt pocket and landed at Dr. Roy's feet. Now, I know you're Daddy, Randy Ray, so I'm going to ask you this once. Were you smoking cigarettes too? Now, I'm not a liar, but I was that morning when I looked him dead in the eye and said, no. John's dad took me into the wood shop and gave me 5 stitches in the chin and sent me on my way. John, on the other hand, was grounded for 2 weeks. Getting back to Victor, I could never understand what Amy Rathers ever saw in Victor. She was a very pretty woman that seemed so mismatched for him. They had no children and always seemed happy together. Perhaps that was the reason why. Amy earned a liberal arts degree from Wesleyan College and worked for the town hall as a tax collector. Victor didn't even make it out of the 9th grade when he took over his father's diner. Amy was an attractive woman with a peaceful smile, chestnut hair, and a pretty figure. Along with Victor, the couple volunteered for everything. It was well known that Victor had a prior drinking problem, but he claimed to be sober for the last 8 years. He claimed God saved his life, and because of that he tried to convert everyone he encountered. I always imagined that Jesus, in his infinite mercy, couldn't quite do the infinite with Victor because he was one hard case. Most people couldn't take Victor's bulldozing personality, but the town tolerated him, mainly because of his charming wife, and the fact that together they helped the town out a lot. If he wasn't talking about religion, he'd be talking about anything else. I've never heard a person talk so loudly about nothing. But when his discussions pertaining to religion became threatening, that's when the church decided to send him on his way. Suddenly, the town was seeing less and less of them as a couple, and more of Victor alone. He was also becoming unkempt, with an ever-increasing beard that creeped up the side of his face toward his dark eyes. He was becoming loony-looking. Victor had become an embarrassment to the inner circle of the church, and the church elders suddenly blocked his seat on the table, and for Victor, that was a shock. One Sunday after church service, the pastor and 2 rather large church members held out a hand to Victor and told him to leave the church entirely. Victor could not accept his rejection from the very same church that he was baptized in as a baby. It was a real blow to Victor, and understandably so. When I heard that Victor was thrown out of the church, I felt bad for him. and most especially for his wife. I also began to look at churches differently then, because Victor really had a problem, and they offered no help, prayers, or guidance to him. They just kicked he and his wife to the street as if they were dogs.
There we go. Swing your corner lady, boy. Now your partner. Now, you put your right hand in, you take the right hand out, you put your right hand in, and you jiggle it all about. You do the hokey pokey, turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. Left hand, put your left hand in, you take your left hand out, put your left hand in, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey.
Chapter 4. Holford's Grocers mainly catered to the Melrose community. But since my father had a long-standing relationship with Bill Ragg at the Standard Beef and Seafood Company in Asheville, we had meat when many other stores in our region did not. Mr. Ragg moved to Asheville from Brooklyn, New York, and apparently retained strong connections to the mob. He liked my father and mother very much because, according to my father, we paid our bills on time and never used any other supplier. I remember old lady Roser coming into the store one time complaining, "I can buy a pound of ground beef in Tryon for $1.54, so why in the world are you selling it for $1.75 a pound?" My dad smiled and asked, "Why don't you buy it there?" "Because they don't have any," she frowned. "Well, when I run out, I'll sell ground beef for $1.54 as well." Since we were always well stocked with beef, pork, and seafood, we delivered to most of the restaurants, boarding houses, and stores in our region. Even Tryon, even though they hated to order from us. Tryon was our sister city to the south, and as far as I was concerned, a bunch of snobs. They always claimed to have better schools, they were wealthier, and were much more cultured than the people in our town. Well, that may be so, but none of that ever mattered to me. I have to admit, though, that they had their own movie theater, which we didn't have, and a fancy drugstore that they served fantastic milkshakes. When I reached the 9th grade, I began training as a butcher boy and made local in-town deliveries, even though I didn't even have a driver's license. I guess the police considered me an essential worker. Unfortunately, it was my job to deliver fish and meat to Victor's Diner, which I dreaded. I never ate at the Rail House Diner because it was filthy, especially its parking lot, which I considered to be a sanitary disaster. It was always littered with chewing gum, used toothpicks, spit, disgusting spent plugs of chewing tobacco, and cigarette butts. It was open 7 days a week, but only for lunch and dinner on Sunday. No one was open on the Lord's Day until the last Baptist service. Victor cared less about other churches in the area because he probably considered God to be an actual member of his church. The dining room was a large, square room filled with 4 top tables. The uniformed men always sat in the back of the building against the wall. Victor probably forced them to eat back there because they had horrid manners and terrible body odor. Everyone, except for my parents and I, ate there, and I never knew why. My father knew Victor in high school and always considered him to be a bully and an idiot. And for as long as I can remember, my mom seemed to detest Victor with a vengeance and always did everything to avoid him. "Victor's a balloon in the wind, Rainy Ray. I'd stay away from him." I'm sure he flirted with my mother in a big way back then, till she probably slapped him down. To order your meal, you would go to the far end of the counter and work your way up to the cash register, where Victor would be waiting for you. You would give your orders to a black man named KC, and he would yell out your orders to the cooks, salad makers, and sandwich makers at their special locations. As you moved down the line, the food would follow you until you came face to face with Victor. For years, I never realized that KC was totally blind, even though he seemed to know exactly what was going on in the entire restaurant. He would know the customer's order before they even had a chance to tell him, and off he'd send you with your metal tray, napkins, and silverware. Victor would be dancing at the register, flirting with the girls, loving on the old people, and asking way too many personal questions of everyone. He would tally up your bill in his head and tell you what the exact total was as soon as you got in front of him. There were tacky pictures on the wall of past sport teams from the high school, vintage cars and cheerleading squads from Melrose High dating back to when my father went there. Victor had a passion for cheerleaders, especially when they came to have their annual photo taken in their dining area. Victor was always posing in the center of those girls with a broad grin on his face and his hand on the butts of those girls. Rarely did I ever see Amy Rathers at the diner. I think Victor made it a point to keep her away from his personal playground, as he flirted with anyone who would look his way. I arrived with my normal delivery just after the lunch rush, as the uniform crowd were paying up and leaving. Everyone wore uniforms back then, from the policemen to the garbage men, paint contractors, and railroad prison workers who sometimes came in wearing ankle chains. Victor saw me pull up and was beaming from ear to ear. He directed one of the busboys to go out to my truck and unload it through the side door. Victor was sporting a brand new t-shirt under his white apron, but his beard looked even worse since the last time I saw him at the wheel with Miss Martha to his right. "Rainy Ray, how you doing on this beautiful fine day? Ooh, what happened to your chin? Did you cut yourself shaving?" That must have been a nasty slip of that shaving blade. But sometimes things just kind of happen, don't they, Rainy Ray? Right, Rainy Ray? I suggest you be a bit more careful with those sharp things. I wouldn't want you to bleed to death. Rainy Ray, he said, coming out from behind the corner and up to the pinball machines. Some kid was beating on the glass of the machine, trying to make it tilt. The bells were ringing so loud I could hardly make out what Victor was saying to me. "Stop it, kid, and go back to your damn table," he viciously barked. Victor's behavior was really becoming bizarre since his departure from the church. He moved right into my space and put his arms right around me and opened his smelly mouth. He smelled of stale liquor and cheap aftershave. "Do you have a thing for Miss Martha's daughter?" he drilled as he moved in even closer. "I love when all those summer girls come to town, don't you, Rainy Ray? I mean, they beat every dang female in this town. Except maybe your pretty mother." I knew exactly where he was going with this line of inquiry, but I didn't know how far he was going to take it. Victor was going to try to intimidate me, but what came next actually frightened me. "You know, if I were you, I'd keep an eye on Miss Martha's daughter and her sexy little friend. What are their names? Carol and Jane? They are two little hotties. It would be a shame if someone in this town got a little too frisky with those girls. Wouldn't it, Rainy Ray? I think you and Doc's boy have been getting a bit too friendly than their mother might even know. I don't blame you either, Rainy Ray. I'd probably go after those cute little numbers, too, if given a chance. I doubt if I'd even be able to keep my hands off them." His hug was becoming more than a hug as his right hand gripped my shoulder. "Look at it from this angle, son. How would it look if something happened to them girls and everyone, including the sheriff, finds out that you boys have been climbing in and out of those windows on a nightly basis? Rainy Ray, you know, I saw you the other day leaving their house, half-dressed. You didn't even have your shoes on. Now I'm sure you saw me. How about you and Doc's boy? Keep this little secret between us friends. Are you with me on that, Rainy Ray?" He faced me dead on and looked me straight in the eye. I said, "Do you get the picture on this, Rainy Ray?" "Yes, sir." "That's good, Sonny." And with that, he released me. "Hey, thanks for dropping by, Rainy Ray. Oh, I almost forgot. Tell your mama I said hello. She is one good-looking number. Do tell her I said hello. I haven't seen her in almost forever. I might have to drop by the store sometime and see how she's doing." As I was leaving, I heard him call after me in a very loud voice, so the entire cook staff could hear. "I love you, Rainy Ray. Oh, and be safe and be careful shaving. I wouldn't want you to bleed out." I had just taken on more than I bargained for as I was backing out of the parking space, feeling a bit lightheaded. I was also surprised at how intimidated I had become when I noticed my hands shaking as I wiped the sweat off my forehead. It wasn't just the level of intensity in Victor's eyes that shook me, but rather his constant interest in my mother. Melrose had 3 annual celebrations where the town came together in a big way. The first was the annual Christmas tree lighting and gift exchange in the parking lot of the old library, which was across the tracks from the playground. There'd be hot chocolate, apple cider, and tables full of cookies, cakes, and pies. The church folk would sing Christmas carols and hug everyone they saw. Hattie Mae told me that they often found gifts on their front porch. That's when I started believing in Santa Claus. I still have no idea where those gifts came from. The second celebration was during the first week of July when the town held its annual picnic and square dance. The entire town turned out for this event, and they were fun. Food vendors sold everything from watermelon to roast corn, apple pie, cotton candy, candied apples, chicken, barbecue pork and beans, and anything else you could imagine. Bands played all day long while the kids swung on the swings and ate ice cream cones. When it turned dark, people lined the streets with their lawn chairs and watched the square dance in the center of the street. Now, the third celebration was not a celebration at all, but a desperate last chance to hang on to your summertime girlfriend. It was also the largest square dance in the region, known as the Granddaddy. This dance marked the end of the summer on the eve of a painful farewell to the summer girls, because the very next morning, every single one of those beauties boarded a train and were out of here. It had been 2 weeks since John and I had been out together, and boy, were we ever anxious to see the girls. John's father and my dad were very happy to be out too, so he let John off his restriction a little early, and we were happy about that. The streets were thick with people cavorting with one another as John and I strolled through the crowd, eating our chili cheeseburgers and sipping on our root beer floats. The Black Mountain Boys were warming up on stage as the square dance caller, using his bullhorn, was instructing children to do the bunny hop. My parents were over by the wine and cheese table, sipping on some wine that came from a vineyard down in Tryon. It was easy to spot John's father with his tall physique, short-cropped hair, mustacheless beard, and colorful bow tie. John's mother was a sweet, matronly woman with a friendly smile. She was a quiet person in public, but at home we could hear her calling us from an acre away. My father was wearing a plaid shirt, stiff blue jeans, and cowboy boots, and seemed unrecognizable to the way he normally dressed at the store. My mother had on a teal-colored sleeveless top with a white cotton dress and tan sandals. She wore the evening well, as men in town admired her. The sky was dark blue, and the night was cooling down from the long, hot afternoon. The big dance was about to begin. The square dance caller was on the side of the stage with a microphone, issuing instructions to dancers to divide into 2 separate ovals and begin to start. The excitement level amongst the crowd was palatable as the dancers smiled, laughed, and beamed with anticipation. That's when I saw Miss Martha standing by the edge of the stage, with the girls by her side. She clearly came prepared to be asked to dance. Her wavy blonde hair was parted in the center and flowed down to the small of her back and below her belt line. She wore a pink crop top with cut-off denim shorts that revealed her attractive midriff, and boy, did she have pretty legs. She looked the part of beauty and seemed aware of it as she posed for several nearby men, counting the seconds to be asked to dance. Okay, men, I want you to go choose your lady friends and form a circle. From down there, just in front of the light pole, to all the way over there, to the other side of the lemonade stand. Blake Thompson was calling the big dance tonight, and he was raring to go. Blake started calling dances 7 years earlier, after he had to give up fiddle because of arthritis. Prior to calling, he was considered one of the best mountain fiddlers in the region. He was a serious man, but a very likable man, nothing like Bear. But he still expected the dance to run properly. The year before was rained out, but this year had a record crowd of about 500 people, and the main street was saturated with people. I suddenly caught sight of Victor, who was struggling to make his way through the crowd in search of something. He looked dreadful, with an unkempt beard, scruffy hair, and a stagger in his step. Victor was clearly drunk, with his eyes glued on Miss Martha, as she partnered up with Larson Darnell, a local house painter, who seemed happy with his acquisition and not about to let her go. Now I want you to swing your left-hand lady, boys, the caller announced as the big dance was launched. The circle was directed to meet in the center and touch hands with a couple on the opposite side. Victor had a desperate expression on his face that reminded me of a soldier heading into battle. Now circle left and don't be late. The band was building up as Victor drove closer to his objective. Now swing your partners high and low. Everyone seemed so happy and relaxed, except Victor, who reminded me of a rabid hawk swooping in for a kill. Now promenade from heel to toe. Miss Martha had no idea Victor was about to snatch her up. All young ladies go in the middle and back to the barn. Martha moved to the center with the rest of the ladies, leaving her partner stranded. Victor went in for the kill, grabbing Larson from behind by his belt. Larson was out of the dance and burning a hole in the back of Victor as the now frightened Miss Martha struggled with her new dance partner. As the gents go in with a right-hand star, Victor followed the caller's order to the letter. Gents swing out and ladies in, and hold her tight till you're called again. Victor had claimed his trophy and was not about to give her up to anybody. Neither did he care about what the caller was saying from the stage. Victor was dancing on his own terms now. Gents swing out and ladies in. It's once and a half and you go again. He was holding her close to his body and leading Miss Martha to his own cadence, as if he were in a dance-off contest. Go promenade around the ring. Ordered the dance line to rotate, but Victor was impeding the traffic flow. Larson Darnell made his way back to the side of Miss Martha, as Victor shielded him from her. One more attempt from Larson Darnell caused Victor to separate from Miss Martha. Mouth wide open, Miss Martha appeared shocked and concerned for her safety, as three other men, along with Larson Darnell, captured Victor by his neck and arms and walked him away. Victor's face was raging like a wild animal as the four men carried him off for a beating. Before the next dance call, the momentum was back. People were laughing. Martha was picked up by another dance partner, and Victor was a distant memory.
Hokey, hokey, clap, and that's what it's all about.
Show me a place where I don't have to worry. That's where I belong. And show me a place where I don't have to hurry. That's where I belong. And give me some time so I can change my mind. And it don't matter if I'm wrong. Show me a place where I don't have to. Chapter 5. That's where I belong. Stayed at our house last night, John whispered over the phone. What girls? The summer girls, you dumbass. Both of them? No, all of them. What? Miss Martha got beat up. My dad's treating the mom, and then he's going to go examine Carol and Jane. The sheriff was here, too. Well, what in the hell happened? She's not saying, but I think Victor forced himself on her. Who? The girls? No, Miss Martha. You mean he raped her? Well, they're not sure. I suddenly felt flush, dizzy, and sick to my stomach, thinking that Victor's threat was suddenly becoming a reality. Look at it from this angle, son. How would it look if something happened to them girls, and everyone, including the sheriff, finds out that you boys have been climbing in and out of those windows on a nightly basis? That son of a bitch never takes no for an answer. I bet he raped her, John. Well, did Gudger arrest him? Nope. He said he didn't have any reason to arrest him. Unfounded information and no witnesses. What do you mean, unfounded information? They must have found some evidence. Well, they're going to try to send her to the hospital for further tests. That's if she goes. God, Victor told me that if anything happens to those girls, he and Gudger would find a way to blame it on us. Rainy Ray, you know, I saw you the other day, leaving their house, half-dressed. You didn't even have your shoes on. Now, I'm sure you saw me. How about you and Doc's boy? Keep this little secret between us friends. Are you with me on that, Rainy Ray? Does anyone know how often we go over there? Well, they do now. And I bet the entire town does now, thanks to Gudger. He brought that up as soon as he showed up here last night. I imagine what my parents will think now. Well, how did they end up at your house? Someone called the hospital and asked if my dad could come over there and make a house call. Well, who called the house? It must have been the girls. Nope. They said it was some anonymous caller. That is so weird. I heard the screen door shut as my mother was coming in from the garden. I ended my call in mid-sentence and made a beeline for the front yard in my bike. Rainy Ray? Where are you going off in such a hurry? My mother yelled. I'm going over to John's. Don't you bother those girls, Rainy Ray. I left the house in such a rage that my mom's comment about the girls didn't even register until I was halfway there. How in the hell did she know about this, I wondered. That son of a bitch. I'll kill that bastard. That pretty woman and those pretty girls come up here to paradise to relax, and this is what happens to them? I hate this damn town. Dr. Roy always loved to have people at his house. The more the merrier was his motto. All of John's siblings and their friends were there every single night. Even his own grandparents had their own wing of the house. But Dr. Roy went even further than that, with a history of taking in people who were down on their luck. It might be a reformed alcoholic trying to get back on his feet again, or a wandering female vagabond needing a place to crash. The Roy's house was like one big no-judgment zone. My father was quite different than Dr. Roy. He loved his privacy and loved the fact that he only had one child. Rarely did we even have a house guest, except maybe my Uncle Bud. "Let them be, Rainy Ray," John's mother ordered as I blasted into the kitchen. "They've had a very rough night, and I don't want you boys up there bothering them. Your mother is on her way over here to help me take care of those poor girls." Well, that explains my mother's comment, I thought. Mrs. Roy could tell that I was concerned about my parents learning about our summer activity. But if they weren't upset with John, then maybe I was okay. John's dad was much more stricter with John than my dad was with me. "Where's Dr. Roy?" "He had to go to the hospital for an ER call. He'll be back in a few minutes." I went out to the shop and waited for John to join me. John's parents always had a keg of beer in their shop for Sunday receptions, and they allowed us to have a glass of beer whenever we wanted to. I guess they'd rather us drink at home than off somewhere else. I pulled out a cold mug and poured myself a tall one. John came in from the garage section and poured himself a draft as well. "Oh, my God," I said as I took my first gulp and swallowed with some semblance of relief. "Well, I guess our big secret's out." "Yep. I expect both of our parents even know about the time we fell asleep over there and you busted your chin on the lawn tripping over that damn ladder," John said with a grin. "Well, what in the hell happened last night? Did Miss Martha say it was Victor?" Well, she was too out of it to say anything, and no one ever even saw Victor there. But the girls are convinced it was him. They said she was roughed up pretty bad and had her shirt ripped off. The girls think Victor went over there after he got the shit kicked out of him at the dance. Oh, my God. He's really losing his mind, John. "Hey, have you seen his wife lately?" "No, I haven't," John said, as he took my mug and topped off our beers. My parents were at the house when John and I walked back in. I overheard Dr. Roy telling my dad that Miss Martha refused to have a full examination because she was too traumatized, and Gudger warned the emergency room doctors from doing any further examinations without her full approval. "Other than a few minor cuts and bruises, I don't see there's any need for alarm. She could have made this whole thing up. You know the way these rich summer women are. I'm just waiting from some fat cat lawyer from the coast to come up here and start charging everyone for rape." The girls, who were asleep upstairs, told Dr. Roy that Miss Martha was frightened by Victor's behavior at the big square dance and left for home, leaving the girls to follow along back later. Jane said she remembered seeing Victor cross back over the tracks, away from the big dance. She said he had a bloody nose and a wild look on his face. My guess was that he received a thrashing from Larson Darnell and his buddies, and was desperately trying to get back to Miss Martha to save face. He probably caught up with her, and things didn't go quite the way he planned. On my way back to work that day, I wondered why Miss Martha didn't leave and go back to Charleston after that encounter with Victor. I sure would have. I firmly believe that God had left our little town for parts unknown. On that single day, I formed a distinct abhorrence of Melrose. The friendliest town in the South? Sure it was, I thought. We were nothing more than a town of religious hypocrites who waited for God to tell us how to live our miserable lives. It was my day to make another delivery to the Rail House Diner, and I was not looking forward to it at all. My mother was studying me with a queer look in her eye. Somehow, I think she knew that Victor had threatened me earlier. I was backing out of the loading dock when my mother tapped on my window with her knuckles. Rolling down the window, I witnessed a side of my mother I'd never seen before. "Move over, Rainy Ray. I'm going with you." I stared at her in disbelief. "Put the damn truck into park, Rainy Ray, and move over and let me drive." There was no stopping her, and not a word of conversation on the way over. There was a full lunch crowd at the diner when we pulled up, came to a stop at the loading spot in front of the building. Victor was smiling from ear to ear when he saw my mother in the driver's seat. He came out from behind the counter and took off his ball cap and was heading for the door. My mother turned to me, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Now you stay right here, Rainy Ray, and do not get out of this damn truck. Do you understand me?" I've never seen my mother perch up on her heels like this in my entire life. She opened the door, dropped to the pavement, and met Victor as he was heading out the door to give her a big hug. She was in no hugging mood as she backed Victor up against the glass door and let him have it. Customers couldn't go in or come out as my pretty mother, with her long blonde braid, tight-fitting jeans, and pink tank top, came down on Victor Rathers in a big way. "Get your hands off me, Victor. How dare you? How could you do such a thing to that poor woman? I know what the hell you did, you bastard. And if you ever threaten those girls or my son again, I swear to God, Victor, I will kill you." She then pointed directly at me as I sat in the passenger seat of the truck, witnessing her rage. The customers in the diners were standing at the windows watching Victor's verbal ass-whipping, as my mom warned him to watch himself for something in which everyone was completely unaware of. "Now you get your helpers out here to unload my damn truck this minute. I mean it, Victor. I'm so done with you," she said as she marched back to the truck. To my surprise, Victor seemed pleased that this had happened. I guess any attention from my mother was better than no attention. "You're looking good, Elaine. Damn good. You'll see me again, maybe sooner than you expect, girly girl." My mother was now fuming as we drove back to the store, not saying a word. "I mean it, Victor. I'm so done with you." Stuck with me. What does she mean by that? I wondered as we drove away from the store that day. How could she be done with something that never was? Or was there something? That evening, as the sun was going down, I was mowing my backyard. I was replaying the scene of my mother coming down on Victor with such anger. I never heard my mother threaten anyone in my entire life. But the way she came down on Victor that day made me wonder what my mother was truly capable of. While emptying the last basket of grass clippings in a mulch pile by the edge of the yard, a distant memory came rushing back to me. I remembered a time when I was very young, when my parents were quarreling downstairs in the kitchen. Mom's voice was more elevated than normal, but it was my father's voice that was prominent in my memory. From my window, I watched as my father walked across the backyard with my mother trailing behind him, seemingly begging him for forgiveness. My stomach wrenched in nausea as I witnessed this rare discord between my parents. "How could you have done this to me, Elaine? Why were you with him, of all people?" he asked as he removed his wedding band and threw it in the woods behind the house. "It was when I just got here, honey. We'd barely started dating." For 1 year, my father didn't wear a wedding band, until one day my mother came into the house holding a wedding band in the palm of her hand. She had somehow found it in the woods. She had been sobbing as she studied the golden band in her hand. My father approached my mother and gently took her into his arms, held her close and kissed her on the side of her face. It felt wonderful to see them come together again. It made me feel warm and safe inside. Whatever happened between my parents became history, only until now. Might it be possible that the person my father was accusing my mother of having an affair with was Victor? I shuddered at the thought of Victor having any sort of relationship with my mother, especially one of a romantic nature. Poisonous nightmares invaded my dreams for several evenings, until I forced myself to push them out of my mind for what I consider to be forever. "And show me a place where I don't have to hurry. That's where I belong. And give me some time so I can change my mind. And it don't matter if I'm wrong." Show me a place where I don't. Chapter 6. As the biggest and last square dance of the summer approached and the first day of school loomed on the horizon, everyone hated to hear the sound of the trains rolling into the station. We knew that just as those big trains brought the summer girls into our tiny community, those same trains hauled them away, with most of those beautiful girls never to be seen again. For many, this was their last vacation with their mothers and grandmothers. They'd be off to their Ivy League colleges like Brown, Columbia, Dartmouth, and even Harvard. This frustrated us Melrose boys badly, because we knew that college wasn't even in our future. We were destined to remain in our dismal little town forever, intended to hook up with some dreary, boring Melrose girl. Our future seemed hopeless, so it was imperative that we made the very best of every single day left. The Granddaddy was the last square dance of the summer and the largest dance in the region. While there were many other dances in the surrounding towns, nothing compared to the Granddaddy. Bands came in from Spartanburg, Tryon, Columbus, Hendersonville, and Black Mountain to not only play for the big dance, but also to compete. Cloggers came in to compete as well, even though the superintendent changed their rules 3 years prior. The Cloggers wore special shoes which amped up their sound in a big way, but also put marks on the gymnasium floor. This year they were told that if they came, they would have to limit their dancing to the shuffle, or cadence clogging only. No stomp clogging. The Granddaddy was also known for a lot of drinking, cavorting, and fighting. Many church leaders were against square dancing in its general form. They considered it sinful, almost akin to sex. They condemned the Granddaddy most of all, warning their flock never to attend. Doc Jones, the principal of Melrose High School, informed the Melrose Monitor that he was told by both the Lions Club and the fire department that the Granddaddy was expected to be larger than ever before, and because of fire codes, the dance was to be moved from the school gymnasium to Main Street in the center of town. Doc, who was not really a doctor of education, but only one by nickname, was very upset with this sudden break in tradition and was blasting Mayor White, who was out of town at a mayor's convention in Charlotte. Mayor White is never around here when we need him, and we're being told now that a bunch of evangelical nutcases armed with Bibles and signs are on their way here to preach about our sinful ways. The mayor's got a lot of answering to do when he gets back into town. The man's never here when we need him. Mayor White also wasn't gaining any popularity points with the town planning committee either, especially when Ernest Juniors and 2 other pastors stormed the meeting and declared Melrose as a sinful basket of communist atheists. "We've come down here to turn Melrose around for God's glory," charged Pastor Juniors of Holy Ministry Independent Baptist Church. It was now 1 week before the Granddaddy, and the town was in a frenzy of flirty summer girls, jealous local females, and out-of-control men. The entire population of Melrose, which had doubled in size, was going completely crazy. Each day there were fights at the lake and on the streets of town when Gudger formally announced that he needed additional manpower and that he was formally deputizing several of his best buddies, including Victor Rathers of all people. The rumor mill was exploding with people talking about the summer girl assault and Victor's alleged involvement. The Melrose Monitor printed a weekly police report claiming the highest number of assaults in the history of the town. As many as 17 rabble-rousers spent 3 nights in the vault because the Honorable Judge Few couldn't schedule enough courtroom time to accommodate due process. The Monitor went on to say that the sheriff had every right for additional manpower. "These men will assist me in preventing any breach of peace in our town. I'm authorizing these fine citizens, including Victor Rathers, the right to be temporary police officers. We need help keeping law and order in this town. Now, while Mr. Rathers has fallen into some, shall we say, tough times, he remains a well-respected community member, and now he has my approval to make arrests on my behalf." When my mother heard this, She threw her hands up over her head and screamed out loud, "This town has gone completely insane. Now we have a sheriff who's a complete nutcase, who deputizes his own cousin of all things, and there's absolutely nothing any one of us can do about this." She was in good company when she made this declaration, because everyone in the store agreed with her wholeheartedly. Victor even got his own police cruiser, too, and immediately went to work arresting troublemakers. Many slept off their drunkenness, while others fought it out together in the vault, which had only one toilet and a single sink. So I guess it's about time for me to tell you a little bit about our esteemed sheriff, Gudger Knowles. Well, outside of him being a racist, liar, and a drunk, he was also known to do some pretty clever detective work. So for Gudger to say that he had nothing to go on with Victor sounded to me like a bunch of bullshit. The Knowles family was another huge family in Melrose with a history of feuding with one another, mostly over property. Gudger, along with the rest of his family, each shared the same short and stumpy look. After his father kicked the bucket, the feuding got even worse, with the Stumpy brothers along with their sweet and stumpy sister fighting over anything that wasn't nailed down. Somehow, Gudger acquired a huge house just above town. How he ended up with a home twice the size of the mayor's always brought a question to the townspeople, especially when it became known that the home wasn't even in the family. My father told me a story about Gudger, and it went sort of like this. One dreadfully hot summer afternoon, two men came walking up a dirt road on the outskirts of town. The men appeared to be very scruffy and looked as if they had stolen the clothes that they were wearing. Some boys were standing by the side of the road eating tomato sandwiches when the strangers approached them. One of the men scowled at the kid and said, "Hey boy, how about helping some hungry men?" They frightened the boys so badly that they gave up their lunches and soda pops to the pushy men. The shady characters proceeded up the road, eating the boys' lunches as if it were their own. Come to find out, the two men were escaped convicts from a road gang out of Tuxedo, North Carolina. The kid's mother saw what was happening in their kitchen window and placed a call to the sheriff's office. Now, Gudger mostly drove a squad car, but on this day he appeared on the scene in his old pickup truck. He also usually donned a uniform, but on this day he wore a plaid shirt and khakis. So he comes up the road, sees the men, smiles and waves at them, and passes by, out of sight. He then turns around back, stops by the men, and asks, "Hey, y'all need a lift?" Those men didn't know any better, so they just hopped on the bed of the truck as Gudger slowly traveled into town. Gudger didn't stop until he got to town hall. The men started to get off the truck when Gudger said, "You fellas are under arrest." He had captured those men without a gun and never even identified himself until he locked them in the vault. Gudger was clever like that. And yep, Gudger was also Victor's second cousin. John's family had their Sunday receptions for as long as I can remember. My parents, along with John's aunts and uncles and nearby neighbors, came over at about dinner time, and it was always a wonderful time. It was held in their wood shop, where the kegs of beer were. We'd all sit around on stools next to drill presses, bandsaws, wood lathes, and the workbench, and eat great food, drink wonderful beer, and listen to the talk of the day. The older folks shared stories, as we younger kids just listened in. Dr. Roy never cared if we drank beer either, as I think he considered beer to be just a good old healthy drink. Each Sunday, it would be somebody else's time to cook for reception, and on this night, it was Dr. Roy's turn. He made a huge batch of his famous 3-meat chili that he served in stainless steel bedpans, which he had snatched from the hospital. Everybody got a real kick out of them. The girls could not believe the hospitality at the Roys' household, with everyone accepting them in as if they were family. I could also see that Miss Martha and the girls were feeling a little better after their terrible experience a few days before. That night, John and I noticed that Victor had driven by the house about 3 times, very slowly. As the evening waned on, and the adults got into their stories, we found the perfect opportunity to slip away with the girls and introduce them to our secret place on the rooftops of downtown. The girls could not believe our mastery of our elevated playground. We showed them most of our access hatches to the building, including above the jail where we saw Gudger working at his desk below. John and I pulled the mother load of candy that night for the girls, with Carol loving the extra-large Charleston shoe. After we consumed our bounty, we moved down to the last building to the north, just across from Victor's Railhouse Diner, and we snuggled in with our dates. Now, I remained a virgin for much longer than most of my friends, but that night I explored new heights of intimate romance, especially when Carol taught me a new kiss, which she had learned in France. It was about 11:30 p.m. when a green Chevrolet station wagon came into town and parked at the gas station across from the Railhouse Diner. A woman got out and quickly walked across the street. As she passed under the street lamp, we noticed it was Amy Rathers. "What the heck is she doing here at this time of night?" John whispered from the next roof over. I remember thinking that the four of us resembled gargoyles as we silently spied on the dark street below. Amy entered the dark diner and didn't turn a single light on. After a short while, she left the building, crossed the street with something in her hand. As the light from a nearby streetlight illuminated her body, we each saw the reflection of a revolver in her right hand. "She's got a gun, John," Jane whispered from their vantage point. She started the car and was quickly on her way back up the road and out of town. The following day I was cleaning up a huge mess after some brat pulled a large jar of strawberry applesauce off the shelves and onto the aisle below, when Amy Rathers calmly entered the store and asked the cashier for my mom. Her demeanor seemed peculiar and reminiscent of a person who had just come from a house fire. Mom lifted her head from her desk and lowered her glasses and glanced down at Amy. Something was wrong, terribly wrong with Amy, and my mother could sense it. Quickly, she was by her side and consoling her. "Elaine, take this from me now before I do something terrible with it." "What are you talking about, Amy? What's going on?" While my mother openly despised Victor, she had a special bond with Amy because of her outward appreciation for me. I never understood why Amy favored me the way she did. Every time she saw me, she always seemed to be studying me. Holding her handbag in one hand while retrieving a huge pistol with the other, she furiously pointed the gun at the ceiling. Customers dropped to their knees as my mother confidently disarmed Amy and moved her out of the store. "Take this, Elaine, before I kill Victor." My father came down from the office and retrieved the gun from my mother just as Amy collapsed into my mother's arms, crying. "Did he force himself on that poor woman, Elaine? Please tell me. I want to know." Terrified customers watched from the window as my mother brought the entire scene under control. My father re-entered the store and reassured the shoppers. "It's all right, people. There's no further cause of concern." Some overly concerned citizen, eager to spread more gossip, must have called the sheriff's office, hoping to elevate the activity. And as expected, Gudger was on the scene in a heartbeat, with a condescending smile on his face. He approached as if he were separating a pair of frightened hens. "Calm down, ladies, before you cause a panic attack here." I could read his lips like a book. He treated my mother and Amy as if they were children. I left the store and stood by the Coke machine and listened in on the discord. "Gudger, you had better do something about your cousin before someone takes matters into their own hands. Can't you see how Victor is wrecking this poor woman's life? What is that monster going to do next, Gudger? And why the hell is he not in jail? You better lock him in the vault, because he'll be a lot safer there than in his filthy diner. Your cousin is a louse, Gudger, and I'm worried about what crazy thing he'll do next." "Oh, calm down, Elaine." Gudger's fake smile was gone and replaced with a frown. "You need to stop placing blame on Victor for everything that happens in this town. Victor had nothing to do with whatever happened with that summer girl." "What do you mean by that summer girl? You never treat those visitors with any respect. That poor woman was assaulted and maybe even raped." "Elaine, she was not raped. There was no evidence of that. And plus there were no witnesses that saw a damn thing. Everyone in town knows just how much you despise Victor over what happened so dang long ago. So why don't you just drop it before I say something I shouldn't ought to?" Gudger was advancing on my mother just as I came to her aid. "Stay away from my mother, Gudger, Before you what, little man? Rainy Ray, you've been spending way too much time over at that woman's house, staying there at the wee hours of the morning. For all I know, you might be the one who got a little too frisky with that lady. I know you've been there because I've been checking on that house on a nightly basis." after all this baloney started happening. How dare you accuse my son of anything? You leave him out of this. You make me sick, Gudger. My mother was now on a warpath, as I placed my arms around her to keep her from charging Gudger down. Those summer girls come here every dang summer, strutting their stuff around town, flaunting their little perky bodies, driving all us boys crazy. The woman's a divorcee, and likely here for a good time. So now it's the poor woman's fault. Elaine, don't act like you don't know what them summer girls do to get all the attention of our local boys. For hell's sake, I'll never forget the day you came into town, flaunting your daddy's big money and her big fancy red convertible with your short sundress. I could not believe what I was hearing as my mother reached a boiling point. If my father had heard that, I can't even imagine what he would have done. Things were about to explode when I centered myself between my mother and the sheriff. Gudger, why don't you just get on out of here? We've had enough of you. Don't you ever tell me what to do, Rainy Ray. And I'm not leaving here until I get Victor's gun. We know that Amy stole it from Victor. I didn't steal anything, Gudger. That gun belongs to me, and I may use it one day, too. And shame on you, Gudger, for not allowing the hospital to fully examine that poor woman. Shame on you, cried Amy. She dropped to her knees and wept. How do you know Victor didn't hurt that woman? Tell me, Gudger. What makes you so sure? Because Victor was with me after he got all bloodied up by that Larson Darnell and his buddies. Oh, so he was with you. Really? Is that right? Probably drinking corn liquor, too. Now, why don't you get off my property now before I call the county? I'm telling you, you really have overstepped your bounds this time. That evening, after the grueling scene with Amy Rathers and the sheriff, Mom left early and had gone over to the Roy's house to commiserate with John's mother with a glass of wine and most likely a cigarette. Truth be told, my mom was a stress smoker, and Mrs. Roy was known to sneak a few puffs from time to time as well. I felt the worst was over for the day, but was I ever mistaken? We just locked the front door and were walking to the truck when a police cruiser pulled up in the parking lot with none other than Victor alone at the wheel. The sight seemed comical to me, but appalling to my father, as he purposely acted as if the cruiser was invisible. Get in the truck, son, he said as he opened the passenger door and gestured me in. Well, hey there, Wilfred. Nice truck you got there. I heard you bought a new one, and whoa, what a beauty that is. I said, get in the truck, son. Do as I say. What'd you pay for them wheels, Wilford? I swear, you must be the luckiest man in town. My father stepped around the back of the truck and opened the door and reached around the back of the seat for something. Oh, come on, Wilford. You and I are friends, remember? There's no need for you to ignore me. I've just come by to pick something up that's rightfully mine. And what would that be, Victor? My father said crossly, turning to face Victor. Within the cab of the truck, he took firm hold of a wooden nightstick. The nightstick was actually an axe handle, and the only weapon my father ever owned, up until the time my mother bought a Smith & Wesson with a 6-inch barrel for the store. I never saw my dad ever use that nightstick, but I was convinced he could handle it well. I've come down here to get my pistol that Amy brought down here this afternoon. I swear that woman's hormones are driving me crazy. I think she must be going through some sort of change of life thing. Well, it's not here, Victor, so I guess you ought to ask your wife about its whereabouts. Besides, she told Gudger that the gun was hers anyway. Oh, she did she? That sorry bitch. Is that right? Well, it ain't hers, Wilfred. It's mine, and I want it back. For the last time, Victor, it's not here. Amy has it. Victor's face was no longer jovial, but was turning a threatening shade of red. I tell you, Wilfred, that woman has been getting on my last nerve here lately. She's got this whole dang town worked up about some bullshit about that summer girl getting roughed up the other night. She's got some damn screwball idea that it was me that done it. Well, did you? Did I what? Did you rough the woman up, Victor? Well, hell no. Well, then, Victor, that sounds like a problem you're going to have to sort out with your wife and the law, if we have any in this town. Oh, that's no way to talk about our sheriff, especially when your wife's been filling everybody's head about this crap about me. I believe you better tell Elaine to cease and desist. Yeah, that's the right legal term for it, ain't it? Victor slowly opened the car door and began walking towards the truck. He was wearing a deputy's uniform that was way too big for him, and he looked stupid in it, except for the gun in his holster. Wilford, If I were you, I'd keep an eye on that boy of yours. He's been spending entirely too much time over at that woman's house. I'd hate to think that he had anything to do with this trouble over there the other night." My father's knuckles were almost white as he gripped the end of the nightstick. "Ain't that right, Randy Ray?" "I'd hate to haul you in for questioning and let you spend a fun-filled night in that vault. Why, anything could happen to a young boy like you in that vault." My father had had enough, and before Victor even knew what happened, he had him up against the side of the car with a nightstick stuffed into his gut. "That's enough, Victor. If you ever threaten my boy or wife again, I'll bury this stick in the center of your brain." "Oh, is that how it works now? You're threatening an officer of the law." "I don't make threats, Victor," my father said as he grabbed both ends of the stick and crossbarred it across Victor's throat. "I make promises." "Did you hear that, Ray? Your father here is just threatened to kill me. You better watch yourself, Wilford, before I'm forced to bring some truth into your happy home. You and I have a lot between us, don't we, Wilford? Maybe it's about time that we let your son know just how much we have between us." My father was boiling over with anger and coming very close to dropping Victor to his knees when he suddenly released his hold. Victor stumbled sideways and fell to the ground. "Dang, Wilford, you got one heck of a temper there, now, don't you?" Victor quickly regained his composure and was back on his feet with his hand resting on the grip of his gun. He looked like a cheap version of Wyatt Earp. Your wife, your boy, Wilford. Don't make me laugh. You're nothing but an actor playing your part pretty well," Victor said as he retreated back to the driver's seat of the police cruiser. "Oh, I think your boy's looking more and more like you every single day, don't you?" Victor shouted with a mocking laugh as he drove away. The impact of that remark on my father was palatable, so much so that he didn't say anything the entire way home. But the impact on me didn't occur until I finally fell asleep that night. When I was much younger, I was known to be a sleepwalker. Mom and their friends thought it was cute when I suddenly appeared walking through their dinner party completely asleep. But this event was not funny at all. I awoke standing in front of the mirror, which hung on the wall above my dresser. The reflection I saw in the mirror was not me at all. The image startled me so much, though, that I cried for help. My father came into my room, followed by my mother, who was terrified. "What's wrong, son? My God, Randy Ray, you're sweating," Mom said as she embraced me in her arms. "He was in the mirror. Not me." "Who, son?" my father asked. "Who was in the mirror?" "Victor was." God. Victor was in the mirror. "Oh, he's got you all upset, son. Now let's all look in the mirror together, shall we?" "Look. See, honey. Everything's okay. There's no Victor. It's just us, dear." "Mom, what happened between you and Victor?" She pulled my damp forehead against her face and pressed her lips against my cheek. I felt her shudder and noticed her staring at my father's reflection in the mirror. "Never you mind, Randy Ray. Just relax and go back to bed. It's been too much of an emotional day for all of us here." The image in the mirror was gone, but I was shaken to the core with the questions. Just who was Victor anyway? I asked myself as I returned back to bed for the remainder of a sleepless night. And furthermore, who am I?
Take her out for a breath of air. You know where, and I don't care. Thank you. Good job.
Chapter 7.
Nice job.
I would be remiss if I left out another piece of information that substantiates the reason why the Granddaddy was so popular. Admittedly, I must confess that I'm embarrassed to even tell you about this cockeyed annual event, which attracted people to Melrose like birdseed to bears. Let me first reference Tryon, our most sophisticated town to the south of us. There once was a wealthy man from the Midwest by the name of Carter Brown, who visited Tryon in its infancy, and was later credited by many to have invented Tryon. Mr. Brown was an architect, innkeeper, horseman, and visionary. Prior to Brown's arrival, and before the railroad, Tryon was as boring as we were. But through Brown's efforts, Tryon became a cultural equestrian mecca and a hangout for fancy people like F. Scott Fitzgerald, David Niven, and Lefty Flynn. Mr. Brown was also extremely connected to some of the most wealthiest people in the country. These people came to Tryon in droves and stayed in his fancy hotel. Fox hunting became a sport of choice and the most sophisticated pastime to the elegant people of Tryon. Fox hunting was characterized as a group of haughty horse people, spending their days on horseback, some being overly juiced by cognac and bourbon as they chased after a helpless fox. I'll spare you the details on what happened after they caught that poor fox. Now, to be fair, Melrose had one famous star by the name of Perry Como, who lived here part-time. The famous singer loved the privacy he had in Melrose, because most everyone here didn't even know who the hell he was. Now, by contrast, Melrose had its own pastime sport, but without expensive horses and sophisticated people. The activity was simply called coon hunting. The drink of choice from our town heathens was not expensive cognac or bourbon, but moonshine. While most raccoons were left to rot, they were hunted for their fur, and the vast majority were eaten. It was also most common that if the hunt was unsuccessful, they would settle for squirrel. In the mid-60s, hunters actually killed off all of the raccoons in and around Melrose, causing coon hunting to come to a halt. What in the world would our town ever do? Well, our esteemed sheriff, Gudger Knowles, came up with a brilliant idea that would both revitalize the coon population in our area and put cash into his own pocket. Gudger had a similarly stumpy cousin living on the panhandle of Florida by the name of Howitt Knowles. Howitt was an active coon hunter in a state that was overrun by raccoons. That's when a light bulb switched off at his ingenious head of trapping and transporting coons from Florida to North Carolina. Howitt was aware of the coon shortage in Melrose and also the Granddaddy annual dance. He thought square dancing, food, parades, cash. Howitt concocted an idea that Gudger would create an annual town holiday on the exact same day as the Granddaddy that would be called Coon Dog Day. Funding generated from the festival would be enough for Howitt and his buddies to trap as many coons as possible in Florida and transport the little friskies to Melrose. After one close call by Gudger's nephew, who was caught driving a truck full of raccoons through southern Georgia 1 year before it became a federal offense, the Knowles clan found another ingenious way to smuggle the trapped animals in the belly of an old orange juice truck, and Coon Dog Day was born. Most people loved the event, even though they had no idea what was going on. I thought the entire thing was stupid and cruel to those poor raccoons. They concocted some sort of a hillbilly parade where all the coon hunters drove through town with their prize coon dogs on the back of their truck. Some went so far as to tie a terrified raccoon on the top of a pole mounted in the back of their truck. They'd taunt the dogs to jump up and try to grab the coon. Finally, someone from the government toned down this sort of activity after they found out about a contest where they would float a raccoon on a raft in the middle of a lake and send a pack of coon dogs after the lone raccoon. Coon Dog Day took on a tacky character of its own, complete with a hillbilly parade and disgusting coon dog competitions, which were later banned by the North Carolina legislature. While many people thought the redneck holiday was stupid, myself included, it proved to be a huge moneymaker for not only Gudger, but the town and my parents as well. Bill Ragg at the packing house in Hendersonville was also happy in the boosting of my father's meat orders. In preparation of the huge event, Mom and I drove up to Hendersonville for a large load of beef, but instead of going straight to the packing house, we made a surprise visit to an old friend. Pepper's Deli and Tavern was owned by Bill Ragg's closest friend, Jerry Pepper. Jerry was also from Brooklyn and had the accent to prove it. He was a stout man with a huge neck and thick arms. At 5'4" and about 185 pounds, Mr. Pepper had the presence and charisma of a man twice his size. He loved my mother and highly respected my father. My father respected Jerry for obvious reasons and had stories to prove it. First off, my dad said that Jerry Pepper was one of the toughest sons of bitches he's ever met. Secondly, one thing Jerry Pepper was not affiliated with was the mob. He was a full-fledged member of the mafia. Jerry Pepper was an alias name, and my father thought his real name was Luchazzi, but didn't know for sure. My mother told me that the one thing you should never do is ever call Jerry Pepper Dr. Pepper after the soda pop. That would be a huge mistake. When we walked in, we were eagerly welcomed by both Bill Ragg and Mr. Pepper, and highly entertained by his antics. Jerry was a trickster, and had a way of making money by daring big, tough men to pick him up off the floor. "I bet you $5 that I can put 2 fingers on you, and you'll not be able to pick me up off the floor," Jerry said to a man much larger that took his bet. Jerry would place one finger on the edge of the man's shoulders, halfway between the shoulder point, and the other at the base of the man's ear. One by one, the brutes failed to lift Jerry Pepper off the floor, and in a space of 5 minutes, I watched Jerry Pepper stuff $20 in his pocket. "Rainy Ray, come on over here, big man, and lift me up. Do you want to make an easy fin?" At 17, I felt I was much stronger than most kids my size, because every 2 weeks, we'd come up and pick up at least one cow that was divided into 4 pieces. I'd sling those heavy slabs of beef over my back and take them out to our pickup truck. Then we'd get back to the store. I'd carry those heavy slabs of meat from the truck into the cooler and hang them up on hooks. So how hard could it be, I thought, as I studied the size of this relatively small man. "Get on over here, Rainy Ray, and pick me up, I dare you." "Ah, what the hell," I mumbled as I approached Jerry Pepper, who just lit up a Camel non-filter and stuck it between his lips. "You ready, Rainy Ray? Go ahead, big man. Give it all you got." I did not feel the pressure of his finger on my shoulder on my neck until I struggled to lift Mr. Pepper, as he laughed out loud with a cigarette stuck between his teeth. "Oh, come on, boy. You can do much better than that." Sharp pain shot through my neck and shoulders as I reached around and gave Jerry a huge bear hug. I glanced over at my mother, who was standing next to Mr. Ragg, smiling at me. She seemed so out of place, being the only woman in this bar. It was then a vision of Victor that popped into my mind, and his haunting threat fired up my protective instincts. "You're looking good, Elaine. Damn good. You'll see me again, maybe sooner than you expect, girly girl." More than ever, I wanted to crush Victor and protect my mother from this despicable man as adrenaline surged through my body. "This one's for you, you son of a bitch." I gave it all I had as I fought through the pressure points and lifted Jerry off his feet by at least a foot off the floor. My mother, the patrons, and even Jerry Pepper cheered as the force of my anger blew the cigarette out of Jerry's mouth and across the room. Once on his feet, Jerry Pepper gave me a kiss on the cheek as he stuffed all of his winnings in my pocket. "Now what's this about this, Victor Rathers?" The 4 of us had lunch and talked about the store, our summer girlfriends, and then finally Victor. I knew that Jerry Pepper had a special fondness for my mother, but his concern for her well-being was surprising to me. It was almost as if he'd dealt with Victor, and maybe even Gudger, before in the past. "Elaine, you tell Wilfred that if any one of those Jimbonis give you any trouble at all, I want you to pick up the phone and give me a call. I'll come down there personally and give them the what for." After we loaded up the meat and drove down the mountain towards Melrose, I could hear my mother humming a tune and smiling for the first time in what seemed like a while. As we passed Lake Summit, I looked off and noticed the people on the shoreline. The kids were going down the slides, and the lifeguards were on the diving boards. I wondered if Miss Martha and those pretty girls were there enjoying the sun. I wished that I could have been there with them, but I had a truckload of meat and a full day of work ahead of me. I also thought about Victor Rathers and Gudger again, and wondered what might happen next. My mother scooted next to me, kissed me on my cheek, and rested her head on my shoulder. I took my time driving back to the store that day, savoring the warmth I had with my mother's sweet soul. It was a memory that I'll never forget as my mom and I moved down that wonderful highway on that gorgeous summer day. I could tell that my mother felt more secure after talking with Jerry Pepper, even though I would never expect my parents to ask Jerry Pepper for anything, especially protection. Even though Jerry Pepper was a nice man to my parents, it was quietly rumored that he would kill a man for $500. I also remember my father once saying that one should never call on the mafia for a favor unless you have no other choice, because you would owe not only Jerry Pepper, but the Brooklyn-based family a favor in return for the rest of your life. The most unsettling thing about this entire situation with Victor Rathers was that I never witnessed my parents and myself being more threatened in my entire life. I thought anything was possible.
Nice job, band. Let's give the band a big hand. Come on.
Hello, 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 our voice of music rich.
Chapter 8.
And the whippoorwill let in the woodland sing. They cross for the side door as I march to and fro. She leans on that telephone and says,
A story came out in the Melrose Monitor stating that Larson Darnell and 3 other men had the crap kicked out of them and were all arrested for the beating of Victor Rathers. Larson and his buddies spent 19 hours in the vault, sleeping some of the time and crying out for help the rest of the time. Gudger waited a full week before arresting the foursome, giving each enough time to believe that they might have gotten away with cleaning Victor's clock. The police report claimed that Mr. Darnell, a lifelong painter, fell from his own ladder while painting a second-story window casing at the Melrose Inn. Gudger told the Monitor that he had plenty of evidence to charge Mr. Darnell and the others with attempted murder, even though he didn't have a single witness that saw the beating. Clearly, Larson's injuries were not even comparable to Victor's bloody nose. Dr. Roy examined Darnell in his cell and reported that he was missing a front tooth, had a broken nose, a black eye, and was suffering from a severely bruised scrotum. It also seemed hugely unlikely that one person could cause that much damage, especially given the fact that Larson was one of the biggest guys in town. The fact that the Melrose Monitor didn't write a single word about the assault on the summer girl was a point of contention with my mother. As she stormed through the doors of the Melrose Monitor and straight into the publisher's office, she slammed a copy of the Monitor on the desk and read him the riot act. "Kevin, you write only what you want to write in this town, but you never write about anything that really matters to anyone. It seems all you want to do is sell advertising." Kevin Powers was considered by many to be the ruination of the Melrose Monitor, because the town commissioners and the police department appeared to have way too much control over what was and what was not printed. How can you expect our town to even be aware of the dangers in our own midst when you print more about poor, defenseless Victor Rathers than the people hurting? Kevin, I was once proud of our local paper and considered it to be a real partner in our town, but you've turned it into a worthless rag since Kevin fired his editor and retained only a single reporter to write only about nonsensical news like a local beekeeper losing her bees because of a bear, or some redneck losing his prize coon dog. Circulation had dropped steeply. Also, because the paper was so thin, most of the people in town didn't even know about Victor's alleged rape of the summer girl, while others took the same position as Gudger did, that the summer girls were just plain flirts out for a good time. Truth be known, it was the Melrose boys who were the real flirts, and adults like Victor. They were the ones looking for a good time. It wasn't until word got out that Victor had beaten up his wife, Amy, and that he was staying at Gudger's house when people were about to string Victor up by his ankles. While Victor was barely tolerated by the community, People adored Amy and were very concerned about her absence from the tax office. Things got so intense that Victor couldn't even set foot in his own diner for fear of being chased out. He left the daily operations entirely of the hands of KC. It was amazing how this totally blind man could run the entire diner by himself. Now that Victor had lost his footing in the community, he switched into Mr. Bad Cop, a pushy, angry policeman with no knowledge of police work at all. He also crowned himself a full-fledged cop, with Gudger and his cronies allowing it. Victor was also coming down on the black community like there was no tomorrow, arresting them for jaywalking, loitering, or even looking at him the wrong way. Gudger even made Victor his top deputy and allowed Victor to activate his own squad of bully cops any time he wanted with a single order. Thankfully, the more the townspeople learned about Amy, the more they came to believe that maybe just Victor might have actually assaulted and possibly even raped Miss Martha. The more the community saw Victor bullying everyone in town, the more they wanted to complain to the mayor, who was still out of town. Having dinner at Miss Martha's house for the next several nights was more acceptable to my parents than ever, because they had become quite fond of her. They felt that it was also safer for Miss Martha and the girls to have us around, just in case Victor resurfaced. Pearlie Mae and her daughter spent there about as much time as John and I did, and I thought it was kind of odd. It was almost as if they were keeping watch over us. While Pearlie Mae tended to her chores as normal, Hattie Mae seemed rather strange and anxious. Several times I noticed her watching me and appearing as if she wanted to come up and talk to me. It was the Wednesday night before the Granddaddy that Victor broke silence and ran his police car over Miss Martha's mailbox. He was drunk and heading straight for the front door. "Miss Martha, I'm so sorry about hitting your mailbox. If you just come out and let me in your garage, I could borrow your shovel and fix it right up." Not a word from inside the house as Carol desperately called the sheriff's office with no answer. Again and again she tried to call the sheriff. "I was hoping to see you again, Miss Martha. I feel so bad about not being able to see you now for several days. But this town has gone so gall-darn crazy. All the men are so nutsy about all y'all leaving soon, and the big dance on Friday." Miss Martha just stood there in the foyer saying nothing, as the six of us, including Pearlie Mae and Hattie Mae, held our breath in silence. "You're going to the Granddaddy this Friday night, Miss Martha, ain't you?" "God, girly girl, I sure hope so. I can't wait to see you again. I miss your pretty face, Miss Martha. I really do. I've been so depressed lately, because of this whole town thinking I've done something wrong to you. Now, you might not know this by now, but my crazy wife's done left me." "Yep, she's gone. Fact is, she never loved me anyway. She thought she was so much more educated than me with that dang college degree and some French thing called a resume." "Holy shit, Amy left town," I whispered in John's ear. "I'm afraid she's found out about us, Martha. And she's done left town. She was a crazy bitch anyway. But she's right about one thing, Miss Martha. And you want to know what that is? I'm in love with another woman. And that other woman's you." Still silence as he rapped harder on the door with what sounded like a beer bottle. "Oh, come on, Martha. Open up the dang door." Victor was becoming frustrated. "Heck with this," he said as he walked back out to the squad car and retrieved another bottle of beer. He lit up a cigarette and sat down on the steps on the front porch. Screw them. After a few minutes of mumbling obscenities, he got up and hurled his beer bottle into the neighbor's yard, then staggered back to his car. "Sons of a bitch, god dang it. Shit. Hey, Rainy Ray. I know you're in there with Doc's boy. You boys had better keep your dang hands off those pretty ladies. Because I'm going to be looking for them at the big dance on Friday. You remember what I told you, Rainy Ray? I'm sure you do. Oh, I know that Miss Pearlie Mae and her pretty little daughter's in there too. I hope that they know that I love them just as much as I love my own kin. But I don't want them to tell anybody about me being there the other night." Hell. I don't care. They can tell whoever they want to. After Victor left, John and I pleaded with Miss Martha to please cut her vacation short and take the girls back to Charleston. But she wouldn't hear of it. She was also defiant about taking her pretty girls to the dance. After the girls went to bed and we felt that they were safe, John and I decided to pay another visit on top of the jail. At about 1:15 a.m., Victor drove into town and pulled up to the sheriff's office. He got out of his car and staggered in to have a chat with Gudger. "I bet Gudger called him in from his drunken patrol," said John. We quietly made our way back to the roof of the police station and very carefully moved our access panel just a crack so we could listen in. Gudger was sitting at his desk, appearing as if he had summoned Victor in to talk. But Victor looked far from having a sober conversation with anybody. "Victor, your drinking is really getting out of hand. Just how much have you had tonight?" "Oh, not enough, I expect, in order to come over here and see you. Why'd you call me over here anyway? But before we go any further, why don't we have a few shots of your swamp grass? You look like you could need some too." "No way, Victor. Someone's got to keep on this damn town, and you're not making things much easier. Now, you told me you were going to tie up some loose ends, but this whole thing's just flaring up in my face. This whole dang town thinks you had your way with that summer girl out there on Lake Summit." "Yeah, well, so what? You said you were going to shut this whole dang thing down for me. I think you're losing your effectivity, cousin." "Damn it, Victor. I've been covering for your whole damn life, but this time I think you've really done it. Why can't you ever take no for an answer with these women? Now I'm even learning that you roughed up your own wife, Amy." That woman's a bitch. I still can't find my own pistol. But that's okay, 'cause I got my own issue right here on my hip. That damn woman's driving me crazy lately. All about my drinking, too. Her problem is she don't drink a damn drop, Gudger. Stop your yammering, Victor. Don't screw it up. She's the best thing that's ever happened to you." Don't worry about her. She adores me. She'd never leave me. I got full control over that little woman. "So what about the other night when you were having your way with that bleach blonde? Who in the hell called Dr. Roy in for a house call?" "It wasn't her daughter and her little friend, because I saw them at the dance while you were over there loving up with that summer thing." "Oh, it's just this little damn never you mind, Sheriff. I'll take care of that situation shortly. Now hit me up for some of that homebrew, and let's forget about this whole dang thing." "Not so fast, Victor. You better find out who that was, because I can't keep covering for your ass." Gudger got out of the chair and walked over to a mounted picture on the wall next to the gun rack and slid it to the side, revealing a large supply of bottles. Moving the picture back in place, he sat back down with Victor, and the two of them began to slam them down. Sheriff, you make some of the best hooch in this county." "I think you've got this shit down to a science," said Victor as he stared through the clear booze in his glass. "What's your production volume now, cousin?" "Why do you ask?" "Well, let's just say I've got to cover your butt, too, if you know what I mean." "What the hell are you talking about now, Victor?" "Well, Gudger, people, more often than not, been asking me how the hell you would afford this big old mansion up there on Greenville Street on a sheriff's salary." "Oh, come on now, Gudger. You know as well as I do that we both have been living pretty high on the hog due to your operation. It wouldn't sit too well if Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Melrose learned just how much whiskey you're producing up there in Holbert Cove. It'd be even worse if the county were to find out exactly where your operation is. Are you with me on that, cousin? Are you following me? Are you threatening me, Victor? Because it sure sounds like you're up to something here." "I'm just saying, you better watch my ass just as much as I'm watching yours." "Well, Victor, I think you're digging yourself into a deeper hole than I may be able to pull you out of." The two were now several shots into their conversation when Gudger looked as if he was about ready to explode. "Gudger, now that I'm no longer a member of that old fancy church, I really don't care what the pastor and all them fat congregation people might think of me anymore." Now, shut up, Victor. You're really starting to piss me off now." "You ain't seen pissed off, Gudger. Now I want you to keep the heat off me with all this silly rape garbage, or I'll blow a hole in your world. You've got more riding on my well-being than you ever really know." At that exact moment, our little party on the rooftop above the sheriff's office became shocked. Gudger finally lost his cool and let the booze control his emotion when he revealed a .44 Magnum long barrel and pointed it right at Victor's head. "Now you listen to me, asshole. If I ever hear any mention of Holbert Cove or anything about my business, I'll burn you down, cousin. I mean, you're diner and all. You got that, Victor? Right now, you're nothing but a bum with a badge." There was a long pause as the two drunks stared at each other and waited for the other to blink. "Oh, come on now, cousin. Calm the heck down. I was just yanking your chain. I'd never turn on my own blood. I mean, we're family, Gudger. Hey, my mama, your mama, hell, we just one tight-knit little family, ain't we?" "I'd never do anything to break their hearts." More silence as Gudger pulled back the hammer on his pistol. "Wrong, Victor. Guess what? My mama hates your mama's guts more than you'll ever know. Now get out there and fix things, Victor, and get the hell out of my sight." I hadn't recognized the full weight of stress on me until I noticed just how much time I was spending on the rooftops of downtown. I was spending all night up there, often falling asleep under the stars. Alone I sat into the wee hours of the morning, right above Western Auto, watching the town below, worrying about my parents, Miss Martha, the girls, and especially myself. My mother was a wreck, my father lost his smile, and I was suffering from a constant upset stomach. I was steeply falling into an identity crisis, often looking at my reflection in the mirror or a passing window and seeing less and less resemblance of my father and more of Victor Rathers. I no longer felt like a cool, reasonably good-looking young product of a wonderful family, but a gross byproduct mini version of Victor Rathers. Everything happens for a reason, they often say. But what if I become a duplicate of Victor? I shuddered as I touched my face and measured the length of my nose. Was I destined to become a balloon in the wind, as my mother often coined the half-witted idiot Victor? I even went so far as to worry that my mother might look at me and see only Victor's face. How could she continue to love me and stand by me and even feel close to me anymore? Finally, a brief intermission saved me. A small amount of humor popped into my mind and caused me to giggle under my breath when an image of the Hunchback of Notre Dame visited me. Comedy relief, I thought. At least I can still smile. "Keep your shit together, Rainy Ray," I mumbled under my breath. "Things are going to get better soon. I hope." I'd wait for the last commuter train from New York City to Jacksonville, Florida to buzz through our town, never even bothering to stop. I thought my life was passing me by, just like that train, and Melrose was nothing more than a forgotten little town. I was so close to jumping on that doubleheader, clinging for my dear life and riding that monster the hell out of here. As the train rumbled and approached and the ground began to shake, I imagined the rooftops as my own private train, with the jail being the caboose and the locomotive way up front. My train was now in serious competition with the next train coming, and a training ground for my future jump to freedom. As the rumbling train approached and the ground began to shake, off I dashed like a wild stallion. My adrenaline soared as I leaped from peak to peak in an all-out race against the massive machine. I became so proficient at running on those rooftops that I often ran faster than the passing train. "How dare you, you filthy son of a bitch! How dare you, spreading your smelly black soot all over our shabby little town? Shame on you for taking those pretty girls away from us every damn summer, and shame on you for leaving me here to rot," I yelled as I took my final flying leap forward. I'm going to jump that southern creeper one day soon and ship my ugly ass down the grade and the hell away from here, I promised as I tearfully watched the last car fade off into the darkness.
I tell you what, I'll buy a spot not very far from town.
if she'll agree to marry me, both will settle down where the wild honeysuckle bloom and fragrant flowers grow. She'll lay upon that garden gate and say hello.
Hello, 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 her voice of music rings. It's sweeter than the whippoorwill that in woodland sings. That cross for the side door is out my to and fro. She leans on that telephone and says hello, hello, hello.
Chapter 9. Melrose had a funny way with visitors. For the most part, all of the men and boys loved the summer girls, for obvious reasons. But also, for obvious reasons, the entire female population of Melrose, except for my mother, felt threatened by the female invaders. Now, most of our loving little town hardly tolerated any visitors at all. Well, if there was a way of making money off the visiting intruders during Coon Day or the Granddaddy, well then, by all means, come on in, y'all. But still, most did not like outsiders buying up our homes, then moving into our town and trying to change things. Our town didn't like change of any kind, unless the change was in the form of cash. People'd say, they move in here into our town, claiming like they like Melrose more than where they come from. But as soon as they move in, all they want to do is change things. If they don't like the way we do things here in our town, then they might as well just leave. My father welcomed change because it meant growth, and it appeared that we would need growth badly and real soon because of a new interstate that was about to be completed just outside of town. It was expected that people were bound to shop more at those big department stores up in Hendersonville or down in Spartanburg instead of our podunk little out-of-the-way town. Oh, here's another thing. It wasn't until I reached my 9th grade that I noticed that the retailers loved to play a silly little joke on the visitors, who were gaily strolling along the sidewalks, licking their ice cream cones or sipping on their root beer floats. The locals would suddenly duck into their stores when a loud train passed through town, depositing a thick coating of soot all over anybody who was standing near the tracks. Women in their fancy sundresses or men in their seersucker suits and hats suddenly became filthy, while the men in the barber shop just sat there and laughed. Other times, tricksters at the depot would quietly nudge some rich person's luggage just a little too close to the train, only to be picked up by a cowcatcher on an incoming locomotive. Often we'd see underwear from an open suitcase scatter like hens across the rails and onto the main street below. On Thursday morning, before the Granddaddy, the fire department began marking staging locations for the Coondog Day Parade. I could hear them hammering the wooden stakes on our tree lawns up and down the street. The parade was scheduled to start at 11 a.m. Friday morning, and everyone in the parade had to be at their assigned location by 9 a.m. We could expect a large custom-made float, a classic car, dressed-up tractor, horses, or a pack of coonhounds sitting in the street right in front of our house. Jeff Tennant, our fire chief, would be directing the entire operation on the corner, while his volunteers happily followed his orders. As expected, Victor Rathers took this opportunity to stage himself right outside of our house as if he was the parade commander. My mother was about to blow her top again as she looked through the living room window at Victor standing in the street, making himself look all big and important. Would you look at that idiot standing out there thinking he's the real thing? My mother whispered as she peeked out from behind the curtain. Victor stood out there all puffed up like a tom turkey, strutting his stuff in his stupid police uniform. He even took a step further, wearing mirror sunglasses. Reluctantly, Mom and I were forced to leave the house and walk right past Victor to our truck. Well, looky there! There's Rainy Ray and his gorgeous mother. Hey, Elaine, you're sure looking fine this morning. I swear you're looking younger every single day. That reminds me when you first moved here. Remember them days, Elaine? I sure do. I'm going to do my best to make sure we put the prettiest float right in front of your house tomorrow morning. Don't you worry about a thing, pretty lady. Again, my mother didn't say a word until I dropped her off in town to help the other volunteers set up the greeting tables for the following morning. I had 3 meat deliveries to make that day, with the Railhouse Diner being the last one. I was not too concerned about stopping in because I was confident that Victor would not be there. I backed my truck up to the loading dock, got out of the truck, and climbed the steps to the back of the kitchen. Brian Osborne, their main chef, slapped me on my back and said, "Hey, Rainy Ray, I'll go ahead and take it from here. KC wants to see you in the office. He's got something for you." I found my way back to Victor's dreary office in the back of the kitchen and saw KC sitting at a desk in the darkness. The office was cramped with cinder block walls, a cement floor, and a thick smell of mold. The walls were covered with half-nude calendar girls, past orders and receipts. Victor's such a pig, I thought. "Hey there, Rainy Ray. I'm glad to see you today." Casey was busy writing out checks and listening to the activity in the kitchen. "Close the door, son, and pull up a chair. Oh, and turn a light on. I keep forgetting to do that for visitors." KC was signing invoices and moving papers around as if he had 20/20 vision. "Here," he said as he tore a check out of a large checkbook and handed it to me. "Take this to your daddy, Rainy Ray. Victor ain't paid y'all for a long time, but we're paid up now. And tell your mama I'm sorry about that, too." "Yes, sir," I said, looking down at a check for more than $1,100. Never had I picked up a check from a customer before. That was always my mom's job, and I had no idea that the rail house was that far in arrears. I didn't know that Victor owed us that much, Casey. Wow. I thought of my dad, and I wondered why he never even mentioned that Victor wasn't paying his bills. "How's Elaine doing, son? I heard Victor's been badgering your mama and daddy in a bad way." "I don't like it. No, sir. I don't like that whatsoever." "Yeah, he's really got our family upset in a big way. My mom is awfully tired of Victor. And he's got my dad really angry, too. That man's in a bad way these days. I mean a bad way, Rainy Ray. I ain't never seen him this bad before. With his drinking, cavorting with that summer girl, and poor Amy. I think refusing to pay her daddy was some form of payback or spite. What for? Why would he do that?" I had considered not commenting about my family's situation at first. But the more I saw just how much KC knew about the whole situation, the more I thought I needed some more answers. KC reached under the desk and pulled out a burlap bag stuffed with newspaper and something else inside. "Rainy Ray, I want you to take this before somebody does something real terrible with it." I felt the weight of the bag as he handed it over to me. I loosened the opening and moved the papers around until I noticed a pistol. It was Amy's gun, and it was fully loaded. Holy shit! What the heck am I supposed to do with this thing, Casey? To my knowledge, we did not even have a gun in our house. And my dad refused to even buy me a BB gun for fear I'd shoot my eye out. The only experience I had with a weapon was a squirt gun. Well, that's not entirely true. John had several BB guns, including a CO2 pellet gun, which we would shoot at passing boxcars. But a loaded gun? Where would I put it? What if Victor found out that I had it? "It's okay, Rainy Ray. Neither one of them know where that gun is. Because if they did, I have a feeling they might use it on each other. So take it with you, Rainy Ray, and get it out of here." What's wrong with Victor, KC? Do you have any idea what's going on in his head? I think he's lost his mind. "Well, I think it goes back a long way, Rainy Ray. Victor's father was a good man. I mean, he was a good man. Now, I'm going to tell you something you might not know. But Victor's daddy raised me up ever since I was a little child. He took me off the street and raised me like I was his own son." Wow, I didn't know that, Casey. "That man sent me to school for the deaf and blind and paid for everything. He gave me a job in this here store. Who would do that, Rainy Ray? I was nothing more than a poor, blind black boy. And that man gave me everything. But what about Victor? Why did he turn out to be such a mess?" "Well, Victor's always been a mess, Rainy Ray. Some people are just born that way. But as a child, white folks used to tease him about me, saying he had a nappy-headed brother and all. Even though Victor thought he could fight, he finally realized he wasn't as good as the other boys at it. Then he started resenting me for his problems, until his daddy stepped in and straightened him out." "Casey," I said as I lodged my first question, "what went on between Victor and my mother?" "Well, Victor fell for your mother in a big way. I mean a big way. And that's before your parents were married. They carried on as a couple for a little while. Well, there it was, I thought, as I felt my face getting flushed. Well, then what happened? Rainy Ray, Victor's never been the kind to take no for an answer. That's the way he's always been, with everything. I mean, he was that way with his daddy. He was that way with his teachers. And most of all, the girls. He always wanted his way with the women. I sent off my second question. Well, did he have his way with my mother, Casey? Son, that's not for me to tell you anything about. That's your mama's business. Did Victor rape my mom? Well, I can tell you he troubled her in a big way, and he even stalked her, too. Well, how did it stop, Casey? Come on, you have to tell me more. I can't, Rainy Ray. That's your mother's business. But I will tell you that it all came to a stop when Dr. Pepper came down from Hendersonville and changed Victor's thought processes. What do you mean? Victor got beat up so bad he didn't even know what hit him. He didn't even know who he was for almost 10 days. He became goofy after that incident, sporting that silly laugh and claiming that he met God himself. He said that God Almighty told him he needed to make things right with his life and leave your mother alone. And he did, Rainy Ray. He did for a long time. Marrying Amy and working hard, up until they got kicked out of that church. That's when he started drinking again, acting like a fool. Now he's hooked up with our drunk sheriff, sporting a badge and acting like a Lone Ranger. So keep an eye out for Victor and his fat deputies, Rainy Ray. Ain't no telling what that fool might do next. I thanked KC for the information, stood up, and headed for the door. Come over here, son. KC got up out of his chair and met me halfway. Before I knew it, he had his arms around me and was giving me a big hug. You're a good boy, Rainy Ray. You'll be fine. Just be good to your mother and father. And keep smart. You need to be smarter than Victor and his clowns. He released his embrace and turned me to face him. How do you know all this, Casey? I raised my head and pretended to look at him in his face. I said, look at me, Rainy Ray. Look me in the eyes. I looked at his blank and glossed over eyes and felt that he could see me better than I could see him. You might not understand this, Rainy Ray, but for some damn reason, most folks think that a blind person's deaf too. They always talk louder as if we can't hear a damn thing. Well, it ain't true, Rainy Ray. It ain't true at all. I believe I can hear better than any human or animal in this town. I can even hear through brick walls, Rainy Ray. And because of that, I know more about what's going on in this diner in this here town than most anybody can ever imagine. You know why, Rainy Ray? No, why? Because I listen. I listen to everything, Rainy Ray. You gotta watch yourself in life. You gotta listen too. You gotta keep yourself safe. You understand what I'm telling you, boy? Yes, sir, I said with a larger-than-life degree of respect for this blind man, who was mostly considered by many as a deaf, dumb black man. I also felt honored that he appreciated me so much to confide in me as much as he did, even though he wouldn't tell me what I really wanted to know about my mother, and then me. After 3 loving taps on my back by Casey's strong black hands, I was on my way out the door into the already blisteringly hot summer afternoon for another full day of work. Chapter 10. Back then, I never thought about my buddy John's level of intelligence. I always figured that we had about the same number of brain cells, but was I ever wrong about that? As we grew older, it became obvious that John wasn't just smart. He was smart as hell and destined to cram even more knowledge into his bald head. I, on the other hand, sucked at school. and was lucky to even advance from one grade to the next. I think school for me was nothing more than a lesson in socialization, and because of that, I got along with most everybody and was never threatened by anybody, until now. I remember John telling me when we were in about the 6th grade that he read all 20 of his World Book encyclopedias. Who would do anything like that, I thought, and furthermore, who would want to? He could also fix anything. He could change out a transmission on his car, weld things together, and make things out of wood and metal. While I was training to be a butcher, John was already working with people twice his age remodeling homes. So when I showed John the gun I received from KC, the first words out of his mouth were, "Oh my. If you don't want that gun, I'll surely take it off your hands. That's a real beauty." And with that, my long lesson in firearms began. It's a Beretta, Rainy Ray, and one of the most reliable semi-automatic handguns available today. That is, if you can find one. It has an effective firing range of 50 meters. This one was made in Italy around 1955 and replaces the 1934 Beretta Modello. I bet it belonged to Victor's father when he was in the Army. Most of these babies were made for the military. It has short recoil action and is made up of a lightweight alloy. Okay, John, stop with the history lesson and unload that damn thing before you blow somebody's head off. He was making me nervous with the gun and embellishing himself even more just to make me even more crazy. You just pop the cartridge out like so, and here are the bullets. John was demonstrating the weapon as if he was reciting a nursery rhyme. Here's the church and there's the steeple. Open the door and see all the people. It's got a 10-round magazine, and each one of these 9mm bullets will blow a hole the size of a quarter through any attacker. Well, how do you shoot the damn thing? I asked, hoping he would explain it in theory and not throw caution to the wind. Well, you just pop this baby in like so, pull the trigger, and boom, boom, boom. The gun went off as John fired 3 rounds into the base of the waterfall. My nostrils burned at the smell of gunpowder, and my ears were ringing as I found myself at least 3 paces behind John. Holy shit, John! Be careful with that damn thing. You just can't fire off shots like that. What if someone hears us? Come on, Rainy Ray. Get back up here and grow some balls, will ya? If you're going to have this damn gun in your possession, then you're going to have to know how to fire it. You don't just stash these things under your bed and hide from them. You need to know how to use it. Now here, let me show you how to fire the damn thing. Listen and learn, Junior. Not now, John. What if I miss or someone hears us? If you miss that damn waterfall, then there's more reason for you to give me that gun. Now don't be such a pussy, Rainy Ray. People fire guns out here all the time. Now go ahead, pinch off a few rounds. The pistol was still warm as John placed the heavy weapon in my hands. Carefully I stood up, copied John's stance, and took aim at the rushing water flowing over the rocks. That's good, Rainy Ray. Now take in a deep breath and slowly let it out, while gently squeezing the trigger. Boom, 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 boom. Holy shit, this is one hell of a gun. I only meant to shoot it off one time and it fired off 4 rounds. You're damn right it's one hell of a gun, Rainy Ray. Now don't you feel better? Don't you feel more like a man now? I did feel better. Almost as if I'd crossed some sort of machoistic threshold. I looked over at John with a newly charged respect for him and asked, "How do you know all these things?" John chortled and said, "Well, let's just say I do a lot of reading." Then I remembered all the magazines he had stacked up in front of his toilet at home. We hung around there for a while, trading off a number of rounds at the waterfalls, trees, and, of course, the no hunting sign. Earlier in the day, I picked John up at his job site and told him I wanted to show him something. I was also so turned around over my conversation with KC about my mother, Victor, the gun, that I completely forgot about the check I was supposed to give to my dad. We headed south down 176 towards Tryon and turned off in the direction of Pearson Falls, a gorgeous and remote setting about halfway down the grade. John and I spent many days at those falls discussing private things like girls, nature, food, and sex. But the discussion on this day was the most painful conversation I think I ever had with him. John was the only person in my life that I could confide in. I could tell him anything that ever concerned me. But when I felt the need to tell him about my mother and Victor, I could hardly get the words out of my mouth. Up until then, those thoughts were trapped in my mind and never to come out of my mouth. After each sentence, John would respectfully respond with a simple acknowledgement of okay or yeah, with never any shock or judgment. So what if Victor got my mom pregnant, John? What would I ever do? That would make Victor my real father. Don't go there, Rainy Ray. The likelihood of Victor being your father is remote. Don't even think that way, Rainy Ray, because it can't be true. Why would you say that, John? How can you be so sure? Because if Victor was your father, you'd know it by now. You just can't hide something like that from someone. But what if my mother kept it from me, John, and never told me? Because your parents are not like that. They're not the sort of people who would keep something like that from you. Plus, if Victor was your father, he'd be the first one to tell you. For the first time in a while, I felt as if I could breathe, as my best friend pulled me back down to earth. Okay, now it's my turn to give you some news, Rainy Ray. So what's the big news? Well, my dad examined Miss Martha and finally got the full story. Okay, I said, mimicking John's normal response. Victor forced himself on Miss Martha in a big way. And he also got very violent, too. Did he actually rape her? Well, he certainly tried to, tearing her shirt off and pinning her to the floor. She tried to fight him off with all she had, until Victor saw or heard something. What'd he hear? Whatever it was caused him to stop and get the hell out of there, okay? It's possible that he heard the girls or someone on the front porch trying to get in. Whatever it was, Miss Martha said that Victor got scared and ran out of the back door. Did the girls see him? I don't even think that they were even there. I think that they were still at the dance when all this was going on. Well, then, who scared him off, John? I have no idea, and Miss Martha doesn't either. She fainted over the whole ordeal. When Carol and Jane got to the house, my dad was already there helping Miss Martha. From there, my dad took them all to our house because Miss Martha refused to be taken to the hospital. The Melrose Sheriff's Office had a grand total of 1 squad car, which Gudger was very proud of. But ever since Victor joined the force, the once pristine cruiser became Victor's primary mode of transportation. The automobile had suddenly lost its charm in a big way after Victor's many alcohol-related mishaps. It now only had 1 headlight, with the other one on back order, no side mirrors since both had been sheared off, and a cracked rear window due to a few concerned citizens throwing rocks at Victor as he drove through town. That's right. Victor, who threw rocks at so many people over the years, was now being pelted by rocks by anyone who could pick up a stone. My timing could not have been any worse when Victor pulled us over on 176, just as John and I crossed into the town limits. On the floor by John's feet was a burlap bag which contained a check for $1,100 made out to my father from Victor, 9 spent bullet shells, 3 dozen live rounds of ammunition, and a fully loaded Beretta. Victor appeared at my window, while another fine officer peeked through the passenger's window at the bag by John's feet. Victor didn't look jovial at all, appearing as if he was sporting a massive hangover. Was that you boys shooting down there at the falls, Rainy Ray? No, sir. Now don't lie to me, son. I'm in no mood to play around here today. Now answer me, son. Was that you? And furthermore, what makes you think you can drive this truck all the way down to Tryon when you ain't got no license? Now I'm gonna ask you boys once again. Was that y'all shooting down there at Pearson Falls? No, sir. Ah, shit. Get out of the truck now, son, and step around the back of the truck. You too, boy. Larry, snatch that bag off the floor and bring that kid around back, too. Reluctantly, I got out of the car and met John, who was being yanked out of the car by another one of Melrose's finest. Now, I'm getting really suspicious of you boys spending all your time down there at the summer girl's house. And don't act like you don't know what I'm speaking about. You boys are about there every dang night, probably having a whole lot of fun with them 2 little hotties. And I bet her mother, too, Rainy Ray. The thought of that image took me off base because it was so completely bizarre. I was amazed that Victor was clearly trying to pin that heinous crime on me. Ain't you, son? I said, ain't you, son? I think you like Miss Martha more than you'd even admit. Hell, I can relate to you, son. I had a huge crush on my 6th grade teacher one time, in a big way. I even went so far as to ask her out on a date, and she'd probably have gone out with me if it weren't for that dang principal. My guess it was you, son, that tried to have your way with her. Dax boy doesn't even look like he's got it in him. But you, son, I think we might be both cut from the same cloth. Both men laughed out loud at John's expense as we stood with our hands on the hot tailgate under the blazing sun. Now give me that bag, Larry. I want to see what we got here. Both men were acting like super cops as Victor struggled to loosen the twine on the burlap bag. Dang it, son, you tied a big old knot in this dang string. What'd you do that for? Victor's constant reference to me as son was now making me angry. Just as Victor was about to undo the knot and open the bag, Gudger pulled up in his pickup truck behind the squad car. He got out of his truck and stormed up to Victor and let him have it. "Shut off those damn flashing lights, Larry, and put your ass in the car, too." "What?" said Victor with a surprised look on his face. "We've just pulled these boys over for shooting guns off down there at the falls. And also Rainy Ray drove almost all the way down to Tryon without his dang driver's license. Give that boy back his bag and stop this nonsense with Doc's boy." "But he's got a gun in that bag, Gudger. We've got evidence here that proves that these boys are up to no good." "I don't care if he's got a bomb in that bag, Victor. Now give that boy back his bag and let him go." "What?" "Do as I say, Victor. Give that back to Rainy Ray this instant, and I want you to get in the patrol car and get the hell out of here." "Why, Gudger? Tell me why you ain't doing anything about these boys, with the summer girls and all." "Because that boy's Dr. Roy's son, Victor. Don't you get it? Don't you have any damn brains in your head at all? If you mess with Doc's boy, his daddy will let you bleed out the next time you go into the hospital for help. If you give that boy any trouble, his father won't lend a hand to either one of us the next time we need him. Do you understand me, Victor? Now get the hell out of here," Gudger said as he snatched the bag from Victor's hands. Victor appeared angry, embarrassed, and defeated as he skulked back to his patrol car and pulled back onto the highway. As he passed by me, he slowed down and leered at me and said, "I'll be watching you, Sonny. I'll be watching you boys really close now." I had just as much as I could take with Victor calling me son, the heat, my mother, and the girls. Anger took over my mind and body, and I exploded. On response, I viciously raised my hand and shot Victor the bird. "Fuck you, Victor! Fuck off and go to hell! And stay away from my mother, you asshole!" Neither Gudger, John, or I could believe what I had just done, as both held me back from running after the police cruiser and beating the hell out of Victor. At that moment, I firmly believe that I could have physically beat the ever-living shit out of Victor. "Calm down, Rainy Ray. Cool it down and never do that sort of thing again. You know you can't threaten an officer of the law. You ain't no officer of the law, Gudger. You know it and I know it. He's done some bad things to that poor woman at the lake, and I believe that he might have done some horrible things to my own mother, too." There was a long pause in the conversation, as Gudger appeared to be at a loss for words. "I'm sorry about that, son. Now why don't you just get back on your way and let's forget about this whole thing. And that goes for you, Gudger. Don't you ever call me son." "Okay, Rainy Ray, okay. I'm sorry about that. Let me deal with Victor. Now let's just get on with our day. We have a huge day tomorrow, and we don't need to make things any worse than they already are. Okay, boys? Are we okay here now?" Yes, sir, John and I said in unison. At about 5:45, John and I pulled up in front of our store. I saw my dad hard at work at his office above the registers. I left John in the truck, grabbed the check, and entered the store. The store was busy with 3 girls working the registers, and Billy, our bagman, helping customers out the door to the parking lot. People were stocking their carts in preparation for Coondog Day, as several said hello to me as I passed by. I eased by the potatoes and onions and up to the side of the office. "What you got there, son?" my dad asked, glancing down at me. "It's a check from KC. He wanted me to tell you that he was sorry about the rail house being so past due." He opened the envelope, scratched the side of his head, and looked up at the ceiling. "So KC gave this to you?" "Yes, sir." "Dad, you never told me that Victor was holding out on you like this." "Well, I can't talk to you now, but the short answer is, I didn't know he wasn't paying his bills either. Your mom keeps up with all this." I was now thinking that my mom might be keeping things from my dad and trying to deal with Victor by herself. As I was leaving the store, I ran almost directly into Hattie Mae, who seemed anxious to see me. "Rainy, I was hoping to see you. I need to talk to you real soon, but I've got to get something over to my mama. Come find me tomorrow, Hattie. I'll be running around like an idiot between here and Coondog Day. Just come find me." She appeared distracted, and justifiably so, by the people in the store watching us talking to one another with such interest. Townspeople couldn't deal with an attractive black girl having what looked like a private conversation with a white boy in public. As people rushed by us and blocked each other's view, I glanced over and whispered, "Come find me tomorrow, Hattie. Come find me." I examined myself as I got back into the truck. wondering why I was so anxious to see Hattie, just as much as she seemed anxious to see me. I remember making a mental note to talk to her the next day. I had to get the damn gun out of the truck and into a safe place as we swung by my house and pulled up to the side of the garage. All right, let me go in there and find some place to hide this damn thing. I left John in the truck with the engine running and went into the garage and searched for a place to put the gun. My father had an old set of golf clubs that he hadn't touched in years. I stuffed the gun to the bottom of the golf bag and was about to leave when the phone rang on the garage wall. Thinking that my mom was downtown, I answered the phone, just as my mom did.
Holford's residence. This is Elaine.
My mother was in the kitchen on the main line.
Hello? Who's calling?
Hello, Elaine. It's me, Victor. What do you want, Victor? I told you never to call me again. At first, I had no idea what was happening and was so close to saying hello. My mother must have picked up the phone at the exact same time I did.
Oh, come on now, Elaine. That's no way for you to talk to an old flame. You know the way we used to get along back then. Now don't hang up on me until you listen to what I got to say.
My mother didn't say a word, but I could hear her softly breathing.
Now you listen to me, Elaine. I've been trying to be so nice to you lately, but you ain't giving me any chance to make amends with you. So I'm going to make myself crystal clear. Go ahead, Victor. Bring it on.
My mom boldly responded.
Now I need you to stop heating up this whole dang town and that little twerp down there at the monitor about me. I know you've been pushing that skinny-ass publisher to print some untruths about me and that summer girl up at the lake. But it ain't true, Elaine. It ain't true at all. That lady's been wanting me more than I've been wanting her. She's just a dang tease. Just the way all y'all are. Oh, I'm sure it ain't true, Victor. I'm sure it ain't true at all. If that queer newspaper boy so much as prints one thing about me in that paper, I'm going to run him into the vault and sue the paper for slander. Are you listening to me, Elaine? I'm hanging on every word, Victor. Hanging on every word. I also know that you've been pushing Gudger to set me in order. He told me everything about what you said the other day. I don't like it, Elaine. No, little lady, I don't appreciate that one bit. You've got me shaking in my boots, Victor. I told Wilford the other day that I wanted you to cease and desist. But did he tell you? Nah. I don't guess he would. 'Cause you've got that little man wrapped around your dang finger. But he did try to get a little rough with me, with his nightstick and all, until I rearranged his thought process. What do they call that? The power of suggestion. I believe my power of suggestion caused your husband to cease and desist. I'm needing for you to begin making things right for me. With Amy, the town, that stupid paper boy, the mayor, and the sheriff. Can you do that for me, Elaine? Are you hearing me, little lady? Oh, I know you can. I also know you will. You want to know why I know you're going to make things right for me? No, why? Because if you don't fix things, two things are going to happen in unison. You know what that word unison means, don't you, Elaine? Tell me, Victor. It means at the exact same time, I'm going to tell your boy who the hell I really am, while I'm arresting that little bastard for raping that summer lady. If you don't think I will, Elaine, then you just push me to the test. Now, the mayor just got back into town last night. I want you to hunt that fat idiot down and tell him to get to the county and clear my name. I want to see some action from you, Elaine, or else. Or else what? Because if I don't see any action from you, well, then I'm going to have to hunt you down and get my own kind of action from you, if you know what I mean. Victor, if you think for 1 minute that you're frightening me, think again. You might have scared me back then, but not now. And furthermore, I meant everything I said to you the other day. I know what the hell you did, you bastard. And if you ever threaten those girls or my son again, I swear to God, Victor, I will kill you.
My mother slammed the phone down so hard that I could hear it hit the receiver from the garage. I was now on the phone alone with Victor as he began breathing hard and seemed stunned.
Is someone else on this line? Is that you, Rainy Ray? Hello?
John was in the driver's seat when I finally made it back to the truck. "What happened in there, Rainy Ray? What are you doing with that gun? I thought you were going to stash it." "Get me out of here, John." "What? Where?" "Just drive, John. Anywhere. Just drive and get me out of here now."